need to read all this like we usually do?
Not
Just that part? All right. Good evening, everyone. Today is Wednesday, March 12th, 2025, and this is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Beverly Planning Board. Please note that this is an in-person meeting. Virtual access to the public is available via Google Meet. Also note that this meeting will be live streamed by BevCam on the BevCam Government YouTube channel only. And as always, we thank BevCam for their attention and their willingness to be here and live stream our meetings. Let's see, pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, Section 40, adopted on March 29th, 2023, this meeting of the City of Beverly Planning Board will be conducted in person and via remote participation. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to attend via remote participation may do so through the Google Meet information provided at the end of the agenda, which is also online, right? So that information is available to them. So why don't we begin? Where is my, oh, here it is. Do we have any A&R plans?
Nope.
All righty. Then I would welcome a motion to recess for public hearings.
So moved.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Seconded by George. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. We are now in public hearings. Our first public hearing of the evening is the continued public hearing for site plan review number 168-24, and special permit number 201-25, inclusionary housing permit application number 30-24. This is for the property at 0 Trask Lane. The applicant is Corcoran Trask Lane LLC. And Mr. Clausen, would you read the public notice, please?
Notice is hereby given that under the provisions of MGL Chapter 40A, Section 9, and Sections 300-91, 300-94, 300-59D, and 300-62 of the Beverly zoning ordinance, the Beverly Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, March 12th, 2025, during a public meeting that begins at 7 p.m. at Beverly City Hall, third floor, council chambers, 191 Cabot Street, Beverly, Massachusetts, 01915, relative to special permit number 201-25. A special permit is requested to reduce the parking requirement from 2.0 spaces per dwelling unit to 1.6 spaces per dwelling unit, and to allow shared parking for 1,050 square feet of retail space at the project, 4 parking spaces. The applicant is Corcoran Trask Lane LLC, attention Peter Mahoney, EVP, 100 Grandview Road, Suite 205, Braintree, Mass. 02184. The property is located at 0 Trask Lane in a RSD zoning district and is shown on Assessor's Map 28, Lot 126. The application and plans are on file at the Beverly Planning Department and are available for public review.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. Good evening, attorney.
Good evening,
Samasco.
members of the board. Miranda Samasco from Glovsky & Glovsky on behalf of the applicant, Corcoran Trask Lane LLC. We have sort of a continuation, as the notice was read, of the site plan application that has been before the board. And we have tonight for the first time the public hearing portion of the request for a special permit, which was filed with you to reduce the parking required from 2 spaces per unit to 1.6 spaces per unit. And before we get into the meat of that, I just wanted to sort of sum up where we are on site plan review before we dive into special permit. At this point, we have presented everything, all of our topics, except for sort of the traffic presentation that would incorporate the discussion of peer review comments and the back and forth that has been going on with peer review, as well as MIPA and Mass DOT. So we expect that the next meeting would be devoted to that topic, and that it might be useful to have the peer reviewer attend. I think that's budgeted for that meeting. Otherwise, at this point, we've really responded to all of the peer review comments that we have received, and would be turning those around in a new plan set once we have things like the parking ratio determined. Just make sure I don't forget anything. All right, so I don't know if this will advance.
Probably not, because you haven't.
Yeah. Does this one advance?
Well, I don't think any of them will, because it's my
All right.
laptop.
Okay, so if you would advance the slide, please. All right. So in summary, our request is really twofold. On the one hand, we are requesting a reduction in the parking for multifamily use from 2 spaces to 1.6 spaces in the application that was filed. As the staff report indicated, Parking and Traffic reviewed this application earlier in the month, and they recommended approval of the special permit. However, they suggested that the ratio should be 1.7 spaces per unit instead of the 2. The applicant is fine with that recommendation. We're fine with 1.6, but we are also assuming that it makes sense to go forward with the 1.7. And so we submitted, in the meantime, a layout plan that's based on the 1.7. The amended request equates to 748 parking spaces for 444 units. It is a reduction, and this is at the 1.7. It represents a reduction of 132 spaces overall, but that is only a 15% reduction in what is provided on site. The second part of the special permit request is to allow a shared parking arrangement for the small retail space that is proposed. That space under zoning would require 4 parking spaces, and we are suggesting that there is ample parking with the 1.7 ratio to have those spaces be shared with the residential uses, and we can get into the details of how that sharing operation might work. And I think the important thing here is that the application is really approving a parking ratio. We suspect that there will have to be some tweaks to the design of the plan. We are, after all, still in site plan review. So you're not approving the special permit layout plan. What we are asking the board to do is to consider that the layout plan that is before you is maybe 90% done and represents a significant improvement over what was originally submitted with the application, even if it's not the final product. And that we will be still in front of you, regardless of your decision, in front of site plan review to iron out the rest of the tweaks. Next slide, please.
If I could, Miranda, just a
Yes.
quick question. The 1.7 per unit reduces the spaces from 880 to 748. What would it have been under 1.6?
704.
704, okay. Thank you.
And one fact I meant to raise that I think is useful as we go on with this discussion. We are asking for a reduced parking ratio. I think it's important to highlight that 60% of these units are either studios or 1-bedroom units, and 40% are 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom. So I think it's important to bear that in mind, that there's a strong likelihood that many of these units will be occupied by a single person under those circumstances. All right, so just to refresh your memory, this is the site. There we go. We have 2 main areas here, the Site A, which is the 4-building site. The auxiliary parking for Site A is here, Site B is here, and the auxiliary parking for Site B is there. Next slide. This is the original plan that was submitted. So as you can see, some of the changes we've made, this included a 2-story parking garage for servicing Site A. This now will be a surface parking area with 28 spaces, I believe. I'm sorry, 45 spaces. 45 spaces will be here, down from 77 originally proposed. All of the parking spaces originally in this unit were compact. That has been changed, and now the surface parking will include 25% compact spaces. One of the changes that happens when we get rid of the parking garage is that this secondary access will go away, and you'll see that on the plans later. That's helpful in that it just creates one less sort of curb cut along Trask Lane here. Also, while we're here, thought it would be helpful to remind the board that this is the proposed location of the convenience store. So as you can see, it's on the corner of Building 4, adjacent to parking all along the street at the X here. And so the proposal for the shared spaces, we will, work with the board and members of the planning department. In truth, we don't think that they need to be specifically designated. We think there's going to be plenty of capacity here and coming and going during the daytime hours in particular, so that we don't need to designate those spaces. However, we certainly will if the board feels more comfortable. And we think that they will be quite compatible with the residential use. And also keeping in mind that we anticipate that this convenience store will be most heavily used by the folks on Site A, even though we hope, certainly, that others from the development, as well as from Folly Hill in general, will use it. But we think if they do use it, there will be absolutely enough parking, and at a minimum, the parking that's required by zoning. So moving on to Site B. So originally, this parking, this was a surface parking lot that originally was designed with 47 spaces, and it now will be 18 spaces under the 1.7 plan. One of the things that happens here is that, and this is in response to both peer review comments and planning department comments, is that with these changes, we will sort of even out the distribution of parking between the two sites so that both Site A and Site B will have 1.7 parking spaces per unit in the aggregate. And all of that is happening without any reduction in the garage spaces. So all of these changes are taking place only in those two. There may have been some changes in the layout of the other surface parking, but principally the changes are with these auxiliary lots. And next slide. All right. So that is my cue to turn it over to Rebecca Brown from GPI to present the parking.
Thank you, Miranda. Good evening, Rebecca Brown with GPI. So you may recall that the last time that we were before you, that we presented some preliminary parking information that we had collected from other sites in the surrounding area and compared that to what ITE, or the Institute of Transportation Engineers, recommends for parking demand generation. So you can see here that ITE, based on data collected at numerous multifamily housing developments all over the country, what they found was a peak parking supply of about 1.37 parking spaces per unit and 0.87 parking spaces per bedroom. And we had also looked at both the Linfield Commons and Beverly Commons sites, as well as a number of other sites that are not operated by Corcoran as well, where there was some data available in terms of parking provided and what was actually observed for parking spaces. So based on the average of what was provided at these other residential developments, you can see that it ranges anywhere from 1.4 spaces per unit all the way up to 1.66 parking spaces per unit. So all of them are currently providing spaces that are less than what we have, with the exception of obviously the Cherry Hill condos and Apple Village apartments that are located within this zone. So they're providing 2.0 parking spaces per unit because that is what's required in the zoning. In terms of what they had per bedroom, it ranged anywhere from 0.87, which was consistent with what ITE saw, up to 1.2, which occurred at Folly Hill Meadows. And Folly Hill Meadows has a relatively similar mixture of 1 and 2 bedroom. They have a handful of 3 bedrooms in there, percentage-wise to what is being proposed here. They have slightly more 2 bedrooms than what we are proposing. And then there were also the Linfield Commons and Beverly Commons sites. Those actually both require people to register to get a parking sticker at those facilities. So we looked at how many parking stickers are actually being provided at those 2 facilities. And those range from 1.37 to 1.14. Folly Hill Meadows also requires parking passes for its residents, and theirs was a little bit higher at 1.43 parking spaces or parking stickers per unit. So we went out and did actual observations at a number of these facilities to look at what was the actual demand that they were generating. And you can see here in this last column that it really ranged anywhere from 1.27 to 1.56 being the highest parking demand that was generated at any of those facilities. And the highest were, not surprisingly, the Folly Hill Meadows and Cherry Hill condos that were, immediately adjacent to where the site is, where there is a little bit less access or alternatives for transportation beyond cars. But even for those local sites, we still saw these low rates for parking demand. And does this one advance it? It does not, right? Okay. You can stay on this one for 1 second then, so that way I won't have you flip-flop back and forth. Yeah, so what we were proposing based on the data that we saw was 1.6 parking spaces per unit, which was slightly higher than any of the observed data that we saw. But based on Parking and Traffic Commission's recommendation, we had discussed potentially banking some parking, and they didn't really like that idea of banking and having to come back and construct later. So they had recommended that we go with a 1.7 parking spaces per unit, which brings us to 748 parking spaces. If you want to advance to the next one. So this is just showing you some of the data that was collected. So this is an aerial shot that was taken at the Folly Hill Meadows on Saturday, February 22nd at 6 a.m. We did also record on Thursday, February 20th, as well at 6 a.m. And then we had also done some observations back in November and December in the late evening, around 9:30, 10:30 at night. But this one here is showing the peak of all of them. And this is where we saw an average generation of 1.35 parking spaces per unit at that 6 a.m. time period. We did compare that to ITE data that showed that 6 a.m. represents roughly 86% of the peak. So we grew that up accordingly so that it would be 100% of the peak, and that's where we came up with the 1.56 spaces per unit. If you want to advance to the next one. So this is just showing you the other half of Folly Hill. So were 339 parking spaces that were occupied for the 250 units. Which was a ratio of 1.35 spaces per unit at 6 a.m. If you want to go to the next one. So this is Cherry Hill condos. At this one, there were 94 occupied spaces out of the 140 spaces that were provided for the 70 units. And again, that parking demand ratio was 1.34. So right in line with Folly Hill. And this one, Cherry Hill condos, although owned instead of rented, does also have a mix of 1s, 2s, and 3s, the majority of those being 2-bedroom units. And the next slide. And so the last one was Apple Village. And we did count, because there's a portion here that is senior housing, we counted that portion separately. So the Apple Village Apartments, separate from the senior housing, had 150 occupied spaces for the 150 units, which was a parking demand ratio of 1.14 spaces per unit. So a little bit lower than the other two for Apple Village Apartments. Next slide. So based on that information, as we said, what we're recommending is the 1.7 based on Parking and Traffic Commission's recommendations, which works out to be about 1.15 spaces per bedroom. This is in line with all of the data that was collected and provides us with some additional overflow parking as needed. If you want to go to the next one. Yeah, so this just kind of gives you the breakdown of where the parking spaces are located. If you remember previously, we were close to a 1.65 ratio, I believe it was on Site A, and then we were over the 2.0 on Site B. So this is kind of evening that out a little bit more, where now we have 1.69 spaces per unit on Site A, and we've got 1.73 spaces per unit on Site B, with an overall of 1.7. If you want to go to the next one. So this is just kind of showing you the layout of where the parking spaces are located. As Miranda mentioned, we really haven't done anything to change the parking on Site A itself, so none of the garage parking spaces have been eliminated. What we found here was that based on the number of units that are on Site A, we would anticipate a peak parking demand of 414 spaces using the data from the highest site. So looking at the Folly Hill and Cherry Hill condos rate of 1.56. If this were to generate a similar parking demand, it would be 414 spaces. There will be on Site A proper 439 spaces. So we do anticipate that the entire peak demand can be accommodated on Site A proper without any overflow into that off-site lot across the street. Next slide. And this one is really more to illustrate sort of the walking path over to Site A, where you can kind of see it coming out of buildings 1 and 2, walking along here, crossing the driveway and coming up to that off-site parking lot. If you want to advance to the next one. And this is just showing, as Miranda mentioned, that we have converted this now to a surface lot instead of a parking garage, and reduced down the number of parking spaces to, I think it's 45 parking spaces on this lot. And we have eliminated the driveway that was previously coming into the lower level, opening up some more open space in that area. Next slide. So this one is showing Site B, and similar to what we did for Site A, we looked at what would be the peak parking demand on Site B if it were to generate similar to Folly Hill and Cherry Hill. So that Site B would generate 220 spaces. There will be 246 spaces provided on Site B proper, so on this side of the street. So we do anticipate that the full demand can be accommodated over here. So these spaces over here really do represent sort of an overflow type of situation. And there's proposed to be 18 parking spaces over on this side here. So just to kind of give you an idea of where the spaces have been removed, you may recall this was previously a full parking row up here. So we have eliminated the parking spaces that were within the 50-foot wetland buffer up in this area. And then there was previously a loop in through here for parking. So we have eliminated that too. As you can see, there's another 50-foot wetland buffer there. So we've eliminated any parking in the vicinity of that buffer. And then similarly, this lot has decreased in size to contain it all outside of the 100-foot wetland buffer. Next slide. So there were a number of comments that were in the staff memo that came out. So we just wanted to very briefly address those and note that the garage parking spaces will be designated for residents only. They will have a fee associated with those, so that will be unbundled from their rent. So if someone wants to have a garage space, they'll have an additional fee associated with that. That fee structure will fluctuate, though, based on supply and demand. So one of the questions that came up from Parking and Traffic Commission was, you don't have enough surface spaces to accommodate everyone, so if someone doesn't want to park in the garage, what will you do? So we will be able to fluctuate that fee structure to make sure that people are parking in the garage in the event we see that people are desiring to park on the surface instead. The parking within the garages is a little bit unevenly weighted between buildings 1 and 4 and buildings 2 and 3, where buildings 1 and 4 have a little bit less parking per unit. Residents of building 1 and 4 will be able to park in buildings 2 and 3, so long as there's parking available in those garages. There will be accessible parking spaces within the garage. Those will follow the same fee structure, obviously fluctuating. If all of the accessible spaces outside the garage are full, then someone would be provided one in the garage if needed. And then the surface parking spaces will not be designated in terms of what is for visitors or residents. Corcoran has found that that really provides the maximum flexibility in use of the parking spaces and reduces down the demand by allowing people to fluctuate between spaces so that there's not a space that's designated for visitors only that a resident can't park in, or for ride shares and things like that that people can't park in. So nothing will be designated on the surface. And then in terms of snow management, we have yet to develop a snow management plan, as Miranda mentioned. We are really looking to get approval of that 1.7 to make sure that that is the right number. And then once we do, we will develop a snow management plan. But as you can see from the numbers, we do anticipate that there may be some availability in those off-site lots for some snow management there. Next slide. So one of the things that we did also look at was the MAPC did a study. They've actually been doing a study over the last several years known as the Perfect Fit Parking Study, where they looked at the parking demand and supply at over 200 multifamily developments surrounding Boston. And what they found was that generally 3 out of 10 of every spaces within these units was empty even during the peak time periods, and that the number one factor that was driving parking demand was the parking supply. So if you build it, more people with cars are going to come. And what they found was that parking construction is really outpacing parking demand right now. So parking demand is going down, but people are building more and more. And having that excess parking attracts car-owning households, resulting in more drivers, more congestion in those areas. And that, more resources being allocated toward building unnecessary parking means fewer and more expensive housing units actually being built. Next slide. So their phase 3 of the study looked specifically at developments in the North Shore area. So Danvers, Peabody, Salem, and Beverly. And you can see on the map here that many of those, they're the ones that are indicated in kind of the pinkish color. Many of those are not at all near commuter rail services or transit services. And what they found was that in general, they generated an average parking supply of 1.25 spaces per unit. They had an average parking supply of 1.25 spaces per unit and generated an average parking demand of 0.95 spaces per unit. And even with that low supply, only about 76% of the units were actually being utilized. Next one. So what their conclusion of kind of phases 1 through 4 of their study was that in every municipality and at every development, that parking was oversupplied with fewer than 1/3 of the spaces being used in some cases. Those municipalities with the most parking per unit had the lowest utilization, meaning that developers had to build hundreds of parking spaces that were not needed. This drives up housing and development costs, lowers housing production, and contributes to increases in automobile usage and greenhouse gas emissions, right when we're in the middle of a housing and climate crisis. So their main recommendation was really reducing down parking to reduce down costs of housing, reducing down traffic congestion, and greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. So some of the benefits that we see of the special permit to reduce the parking is that it gives us some flexibility for less impactful site design to get some of that parking outside of the wetlands buffers. It produces a material reduction in impervious space where we're able to eliminate a lot of the surface parking and some of the driveways as well. It promotes having a lower car ownership ratio per household, thereby reducing the potential traffic in and out of the neighborhood, and reduces the costs associated with constructing the site to keep the units more affordable, allows for more open space, and it's consistent with the other multifamily developments along Trask Lane. So with that, do we want to open it to questions here?
I'll just mention a couple of things.
Sure.
So one couple of items I wanted to highlight. One is that in addition to Rebecca's thorough work, the peer reviewer hired by the city did review this same analysis. And I don't believe the board has received that, correct?
I think so.
Okay. So I'm not sure if, I wanted to just highlight, a lot of this is about traffic in particular, but on the parking, and this is from their letter of February 21st, and it's by Vanass Associates, who actually attended the Parking and Traffic Commission meeting. We support the proposal to reduce the overall parking supply for the project to a constructed parking supply of 1.6 parking spaces per unit. This was before the discussion about 1.7, with the parking for each site to be located immediately proximate to the residential buildings such that the parking within each site meets this ratio. This parking ratio, 1.6, is consistent with and exceeds the observed parking demand data for similar multifamily residential developments in a suburban setting as documented by the ITE. So that's the data that Rebecca just went through. So this has been independently reviewed. The comment regarding the location of the parking more evenly distributed, that's something that we addressed in this new plan, so that each, as I said, each of A and B have the same number of spaces at 1.7. And I will go on to say that one of the reasons that the Parking and Traffic Commission decided to increase that number to 1.7 was sort of in lieu of having shadow parking designated on the plans. So one suggestion was that we go at 1.6, but that we go through site plan review to design those ancillary shadow parking areas. During the discussion, we suggested that at 1.7, that would give everybody the buffer over the 1.5 or so that is recognized, and that would be the cleanest way to go. So that's a little bit of explanation on how we got to the 1.7. And I think the conditions suggested by the Parking and Traffic Commission, which are in your staff report and in their letter, are generally fine. We discussed at the meeting, and I would like to discuss one more time, the fact that there's a condition in there that sort of says at a minimum each unit shall be assigned one parking space, which as a practical matter is fine, but as a condition, we feel that it sort of unnecessarily restricts what might be future conditions. There could be folks who depend on rideshare. There could be a shuttle there 10 years from now. And there may very well be residents who live here who don't have a car. I know that's hard sitting here today and thinking about the project and its access, but we don't know what it's going to look like 10 years or 15 years from now. And we think this condition doesn't really accomplish anything, since the developer certainly has an interest in making sure there is enough parking so that they can get enough people to rent their apartments. And they're not going to have a whole bank of units with parking that's not available. So we just think that that condition is well-intentioned and not necessarily problematic, is not necessary, given that circumstances may change over time. And then the other item I just wanted to say is that our application does go through the special permit criteria in detail. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through that again right now, but I'd like to just reserve some time at the end of the meeting to address those criteria, along with any questions that or comments that have come from the board and members of the public.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Questions from members of the board? George?
These are going to be mostly for Ms. Brown, because they're a little bit technical. You relied a lot on the ITE in this. Obviously, you guys did a lot of data collection as well. Educate me, are there other competing groups that are out there? Is ITE pretty much the standard around the country?
Yeah, so ITE is pretty much the go-to for parking demand generation. Yeah, as a standard across transportation engineering.
Do you have any idea, that it was noted that there were something like 200 studies that kind of contributed to the parking demand model that you guys were relying on. Do you have any idea what the time frame of those kind of studies were? Like, how recent was this sort of revision of their,
Yep,
because I know
so
they've
they
been
were
around for a long
collected
time.
between 2015 and 2023.
Awesome. I had a question, I guess, about demographics on the site. I know, there are a lot of different developments that are up there currently that have very different demographics. Do demographics play a role in your projections at all? Or does that inform sort of, I guess, how Corcoran thinks about parking on the site?
That might be more a
Maybe a
question
better
for
question for
Corcoran,
Corcoran,
how
fair,
they think
yeah.
about it. But I would say that, Folly Hill is probably the best example. It has similar mix of 1, 2, 3-bedroom units to what is being proposed here. I think there's a lot of diversity as well within Folly Hill Apartments, and it's probably very similar. I don't know, Peter, if you or Tim have any thoughts on how that plays in.
No, Peter Mahoney with John Corcoran and Company. I mean, I think the data that we provided, that we actually collected data from, were some of our properties and others, comparable properties, those were all in the same genre, I'd say, Class A, multifamily. So I think, and that's mostly what we're building these days. So I guess we're just comparing to other things that we're doing of like. So I guess that's, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's perfect. Do you guys have examples of other developments that are on such sort of transportation challenged sites?
Yeah, our site in Linfield is an excellent example. Linfield Commons, it's up on the hill behind Herb Chambers off of Route 1.
Okay.
That's it. It's very similar, one way in, one way out.
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah.
Question on the accessible spaces. I was getting a little confused on so there are denoted accessible spaces inside. Presumably I think you mentioned there are accessible spaces outside as well.
There will be, yes.
Do I guess you guys haven't designed that yet, but
Yeah.
do we have an
Do
idea,
we have-
like
we have
number?
those laid out? Yes. Yeah, so they are laid out.
Okay, I think I'm seeing them right next to the
Yeah,
door
there's a
there.
couple right there.
Okay. And I should probably know this, I assume those have to be provided for each building, or is that not a requirement in our zoning?
It's a requirement based on the total number of parking spaces. There's a certain percentage that have to be designated as handicapped accessible. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. It's been a long time since I've had
Sure.
to do that.
I presume that we don't have a requirement that there need to be a certain number near each building though necessarily?
Not necessarily each building, no.
Okay,
There are ADA requirements stating that you want them near entrances and like accessible points of like, because it's more than just, the ADA is more than just someone in a wheelchair. It's also someone that has breathing issues or something like that. You don't want them walking a long distance.
sure. Okay. I might have more questions about that, but I'll kind of move on for now. Will there be a fee for non-garage parking? It seems like not, but I just want to confirm that.
I believe there is no fee for the non-garage, is that correct? Or for your first vehicle?
Tim Corcoran from John M. Corcoran Company as well. I think that's, again, similar to how the pricing will work on the garage spaces. It's going to be kind of a market-driven condition at the time, and based on kind of supply and demand and what kind of reaction we get on the demand for surface spaces and their associated costs versus garage spaces and their associated costs. We'll have to do some tweaking to that pricing to make sure that the parking is equally kind of satisfied and that it works for the property.
So, obviously, I think there's a lot of different ways you can price. Is there, when you guys do this in other locations, for instance, is there a total occupancy ratio that you're aiming for in terms of trying to dial in the right prices for various kinds of parking spaces?
In terms of, I would say, industry standard for total occupancy levels at these types of properties is somewhere in and around 95%. You're typically not going to have a situation where 100% occupied, certainly not on a site of this size with 440 units. Maybe something, if you had a smaller 30, 40, 50 unit building, you might be pushing closer or up to 100%. But given the unit count here, I think you're going to be more in the mid-90s range.
Okay.
And the parking would kind of go along with that.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
One more question, I'm not sure who this is for. Do we have any idea on what the change in the total, non-permeable surfaces on the site would be? That was something you mentioned in your presentation, Mr. Brown? 0.7% decrease, is that? Okay, so 7.7 of the permeable surfaces at a 2% ratio will be decreased at this 1.7 ratio. Thank you.
Ken, I think it's on the slide that has the parking summary. It's down at the bottom.
I think so too. Yep, there it is.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Blow up of that, actually.
Yeah, we went through that one pretty quick, so, yeah. Thank you. Those are my questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Other questions, members of the board? Marcus?
Mike?
Yeah, there's a point brought up about the distinction between the one-bedrooms and studios. So a point, my experience or whatnot, a lot of one-bedrooms I think are double occupancy. I didn't know if you guys had any stats on that. I know there obviously are some. Studios I think are single. You don't need 2 cars for a studio, but there's 37 of those. But the 230 one-bedroom apartments, do you have any sort of estimation based off of other units and other places that you have?
I'm not sure. I mean, I agree with you that many one-bedroom apartments may be occupied by more than one person. I think the better stat is the parking spaces per bedroom that Rebecca had up on her slide of the data we collected internally and externally. So just because there's 2 people living there doesn't mean they have, more likely they don't have 2 cars is our experience. So I think that it's skewed more toward actually just under one space per bedroom overall. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, I just didn't know if there was any sort of, I'm not sure if you ever had any data on that or whatnot. So I thought
Yeah, I mean, the actual physical occupancy of the apartments does widely vary, obviously, but I think when we're talking about the parking, we look at it on a number of parking spaces provided per bedroom in the overall community.
Other questions? Ms. Flannery?
Madam Chair. My question is for Ms. Brown. It's more point of clarification, Rebecca. On your Apple Road annotation report, you indicate Folly Hill Meadows Apartments as well as Folly Pond Apartments.
Yeah, so they're one development, but they were counted because of the way they're separated into 2 different parking fields. So yeah, if you're looking through the appendix and you see the parking numbers, yeah, one is near the pond and it was labeled as Folly Hill Pond, and that was the only designation between the 2.
But it's under the umbrella.
They're all under the umbrella of Folly Hill. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Just following up to that question, so on that page that Ellen was referencing, it says quantity. I'm presuming that's the number of units?
Thank you, Ellen.
No, quantity is the number of
Parking spaces, okay.
So quantity is the number of occupied parking spaces that were recorded during that time period.
Okay. While I have you, looking at the previous pages, there's a breakdown of 40 Technology Center Drive, Bell Stoughton in Stoughton. Is that the lodge at Stoughton that is referenced on your big parking supply summary table?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
So that's a 2015 analysis. How different are things with respect to parking at that period of time, pre-COVID, all of that, to now?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't done a study pre and post-COVID on parking demand. Trip generation wise, things have gone down substantially since COVID. But in terms of parking demand, I'm not sure how that has impacted demand. Obviously, there's a larger use since 2015 of rideshare services that have reduced down the number of cars that people are owning.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
So since COVID, there's a higher use of rideshare services as well as like food delivery services like Uber Eats, DoorDash, and things like that. That reduced down people's reliance on vehicles, so they're owning fewer vehicles overall. And that's more just a general trend than a COVID-related trend, but since 2015, that's kind of been the trend.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions?
One other
Ms.
note.
Flannery?
Yeah, and this regarding the deliveries, Rebecca, whether a designated delivery area, more so for UPS or the Postal Service or Amazon? There's, with the number of deliveries today versus years past, there's no sense of a designated space for deliveries in either of the buildings? Or no need for one, I should say?
Yes, so we did not plan on designating any parking spaces for those types of delivery services. We assume that they will pull up as close to the door or as close to the mailboxes as possible, which they'll know where those are, with the majority of those deliveries being made during the day when, not as many residents are parked on the site.
Thank you.
The hatched area next to Building 2, are those not loading spaces? They're
Right in that area
Yeah,
there?
30 feet long.
Are those loading, Joe? Or are those?
Yeah, we're showing, those are 3 loading spaces shown there. Yes, they're proposed as multi-use currently. I think the idea would be that they would be available for deliveries of that type, and also something that potentially our management office could utilize to assist with move in, move out, that type of thing.
Would it
So that
be,
was the
but
idea.
are those spaces also available for resident parking, or would they just be designated for larger, for like Amazon deliveries, moving trucks, things like that?
I think the intent was that they'd kind of be flexible spaces that could be used for a little bit of all of the above. They are, Joe can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they are sized considerably larger than if you look across.
Yeah, they're 30 feet instead
Yeah.
of the 22.
Yes.
Yeah.
Other questions? Go ahead, please, thank you.
Back to the payment aspect of parking, what if people don't want to pay to park? And there's a limited number of surface parking,
Yeah.
Mr. Mahoney?
We're in the business of renting apartments, so as Tim mentioned, it's a market thing. So we've been in situations where we've tried to get rent for parking spaces, the market says no, you stop trying to get rent for parking spaces. And so we react to what the market tells us is available.
But looking for the reduction of the surface spaces, is it geared more to not paying to park in the garage, do you think, or?
No, I don't think, I honestly don't think so. I mean, I think, if and when we do charge for surface spaces, it's really to try to manage where people will park. rather than
So they will be
deter
charging
'em.
for all parking?
Potentially.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, but, you know, we've done this in the past where we've charged, you know, very nominal parking for your first car, and then if you want more, it ramps up over, depending on what you're trying to accomplish with your parking.
Okay. Thank you.
Rebecca, on that table one parking supply summary, are all of these, the bottom, I guess, third of the page, the Lodge at Stoughton, Alta Legacy Farms in Hopkinton, the Commons at Weiss Farm in Stoneham, Richmond Vista in Wakefield, Kimball Towers in Burlington, are those all 2015 data?
They probably are. They're definitely on the older side, because those were all studied as part of a study for, I believe it was actually for Beverly Commons, that those were studied for when that one was developed. Oh, it was, okay. Okay. Yeah, so those were all studied as part of the Weiss Farm.
What kind of adjustment is made for the Beverly Commons data, given that it's within walking distance of the North Beverly Plaza? I mean, to me, it's almost an apples to oranges comparison.
Yeah, and we do recognize that that one obviously does have different access to transit, to, you know, different amenities in the area and everything. That one did come out with a much lower parking ratio, not surprisingly. It was 1.14. And that's part of why we relied much more heavily on the parking ratios for Folly Hill Meadows and Cherry Hill condos that were at the 1.56. So we kind of did treat that one like an outlier and really looked at what was the highest that we saw at any of these. And let's make sure we design for that and provide some extra cushion just in case.
Well, out of all this data on the table, you just said it was 1.14. Isn't that the registered vehicle ratio?
That is the registered vehicles at Beverly Commons. That is correct.
But the parking supply ratio per unit is 1.4.
It is correct, yes. They actually provide 1.4, and they have a ratio of 1.14 spaces per unit that have registered stickers.
And that presumes that every car is registered with a sticker.
With the exception of the occasional visitors, yes. So there's probably slightly more demand than the 1.14 because of some visitors, but then, you know, not all residents are on site at one time as well.
Other questions? Shall we open it up to the public then? Is there anybody within the public present here tonight who wishes to be heard? Sir, if you would head over to the podium, state your name and address, please.
Bill Squibb, excuse me, Bill Squibb, 509 Cabot Street. I have, well, two questions on this is, as far as the statistics that you're looking at right now, there are two large developments that are under construction right now. One is as you're going down Route 128 on the left. I don't know what that is named or whatever, but it's enormous. Could those statistics be included? And secondly, there is a project under construction on Route 62. I believe it's in North Reading. It's called Martin's Landing, and it's 450 units, so comparable. It's 9 buildings with 50 units each. It would be interesting to see what those statistics are. Thank you.
Thank you. Good.
Bill, is that property you're referring to in Wakefield? Is that the development you're referring to on 128?
Yes, I
In
believe it is.
Wakefield?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They tore everything down in that area, and
It's the apartment complex on the Quinnipiac in Wakefield.
correct.
Yeah. That's it, it's in
Yes.
Wakefield, it's big, yeah.
Thank you.
Other members of the public present here tonight who wish to be heard? If you would, sir. Your name and address for the record, please?
Hi, Patrick Knight, 4 Duck Pond Road, Cherry Hill Condominiums in Beverly. As you know, I live next door to the project, and my concerns are the parking. If we reduce the size of the parking available, people being what they are, they're going to park in our parking lot. We could keep saying that they're not going to, but visitors are going to come, it's going to be constantly abused. And my biggest concern is snow. You don't have a plan for snow right now. We're using Folly Hill Apartments as a comparison. The way Folly Hill Apartments handles their snow is it's almost a half a mile lane. Trask Lane is almost a half a mile long. They have smaller units broken up throughout the place. So during snow removal, all the cars park on Trask Lane. That's the plan. Even though it's a yellow curb and fire lane, it's still okay. They park there for the day. The snow removal comes and removes everything, then they all move back in. It's been that way forever. It's not really a problem for the most part because they don't stay there, but that's how they handle snow. This is at the end of Trask Lane. The only thing around it is Apple Village and Cherry Hill Condominiums. This Trask Lane is up the road from them. They'd have to walk 1/10 of a mile or wherever they're going to go and walk right through our parking lot to get there. I doubt we're going to, if you want to pull it up on Google Earth, you're welcome to do it, but you're going to see it's a long and windy road, Trask Lane is, and we're surrounding it, Cherry Hill Condominiums and Apple Village. I've sent in pictures in the past of how they handle the snow removal. The entire Trask Lane is covered. I'm sure Mr. Clausen has those pictures. I'm not sure if it's available right now or not, but, I have a movie of it. The entire length. There's not one spot open along Trask Lane. That is how they handle snow removal. You don't have any curb space here. 0 curb space. How is snow going to be handled? I've been asking this meeting after meeting after meeting. We don't have an answer because it's impossible to come up with. If you don't have enough parking, here it is here. You could see this is the road, and you'll see all the parking lots are empty because they've all parked on Trask Lane. That's the plan. You can't use that plan for this project. They're going to park in our parking lot, and then we're responsible for having them towed. That's what the parking commission told us. Okay, you could always have them towed. Now we have to have police handling the cars that are not marked, they're guests. All the abuse will be on us because this reduction won't allow for parking for all the vehicles. Part of this 2.0 parking spaces is to allow for snow removal. The piles go over here, you move over to this side of the lot. That's what we do. And as far as the comparisons, we're a condo. I'm a middle-aged person there, so there's a lot of people there that don't even drive. So we're not a good comparison for this high-end apartment buildings that are on this. We're on a dead-end street. Everyone there will need a car. Whether you're getting a delivery or not, 2 cars will be in this place. There's no way in, no way out. You need a car. Beyond that, I'd also like to say a number of people have asked me to voice some concerns. If you're not familiar with this, I beg of you, go to the site and look at it and you'll see what I mean. We're in a tiny little corner where this is proposed. There just is nowhere for them to go other than to bully on us and Apple Village Senior Housing, which is on the other side.
So is it fair to say that your concern is that when a snowstorm hits and it's time for them to clear the property, that they will instruct the residents to move their cars into your
No,
area?
it just will be done. If you've got nowhere to park, they're on their own. You could go find a parking space someplace, unless you have a better plan for me, I don't know. But where are they gonna go? I keep asking this every meeting. Where are they going to go if you don't have enough parking spaces? They might be asked to park there, but people being what they will, they're going to. And if they don't have a sticker on their car, how will we know?
Mr. Knight, I think it's a legitimate question, and I know the applicant doesn't have a plan, but I would be hard-pressed to think that they haven't at least thought about it. So what are the tentative plans for snow removal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, so what we said in the beginning remains the case. We will come to Parking and Traffic and Planning Board with a detailed snow removal plan once we know how many parking spaces we have. If this plan holds, I can tell you that, as Rebecca reported, we fully anticipate that those 2 auxiliary parking lots will be virtually unused for regular parking. There will be substantial amounts of area that will be available there as either for people to park, to plow there and have people park there while they plow other lots. They will explain. They're in the business of doing this. They will truck out the snow if they have to. We will find designated snow storage areas on site that make sense. A distinguishing factor is that a significant portion of these parking spaces are covered underground that don't require snow removal. So there's more flexibility built into the program for that. And we know that we have to satisfy the board and the Parking and Traffic Commission and certainly the neighbors' concerns regarding snow removal. And we will be back to do that.
Go ahead, Alan. Yeah. One question, Miranda, is that I understand from a snow removal perspective, but myself living in a condo and knowing what we have to do in terms of cars.
your
Thank you,
microphone.
Kim. Thank you, Kim. Knowing that you have to move your car, I think Mr. Knight's question, as others are, where are those cars going when you want to come in to plow? Where are they going to go on, if it's not plow, if we're in the middle of plowing everybody, where are they going to go?
Well, as I said, if those auxiliary spaces are not being used, those get plowed first. People are asked to, I'm making this up as I go along, Peter.
It's a fine line, and I understand that, because I've worked in that sense
Yeah,
to make it
so
work.
we will come with a very specific plan. We need to know
You have to.
how much surface spot space we have, what
Okay.
snow storage we have versus where we need to be able to haul snow off. We manage 80-plus properties, 13,000 apartments, all in this area. So we manage snow at every single one of those. It's different everywhere because there's different site constraints. In almost every case, we're having people come out during after the storm. We keep the roadways clear. And then after the storm, we're in larger storms that need all the spaces cleared. We're having people come out during certain portions of the site, during certain specific timeframes, move. It takes not a ton of time to clear 40 spots with a plow, and then they're back in their spots. In no case are we telling people to park on other people's property. I can guarantee that.
And I'm not
Never
inferring
said that either,
I'm
by
not
the way.
inferring that. I'm just, when people don't, where do they go if they don't have a place to park? And that's, if they see an open space, we're just gonna move, because who knows when the plow's coming back? It's that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's not like go move your car because we're gonna clear these spaces all day. It's like 40 minutes, 20 minutes. It's very short increments, very small spaces.
As long as people are home to move their cars.
Yeah, and in that case, if they don't move their car, then they're not bothering any of our neighbors. We have to deal with it.
So one thing I've asked for in the past, and this may sound ridiculous, but if there's no issues, then this won't be a problem. How about we put a fine each time somebody violates that the developer is responsible, or for the management firm is responsible for paying that fine that goes into clearing our lot of the spaces that weren't able to be cleared. That way it puts the responsibility and ownership on the developer and not the victim at the end who has to search for people who have violated.
Well, I would say this, that might be a potential remedy should we all find out down the road that there is a problem. But I think it's premature to make that any type of a condition of a special permit.
Then do you have any suggestions how we could go about that process as it goes along? As we see violators, is there a place, do we report it to you? Do we traffic and safety? How do we handle if it's a constant problem? Legally, morally, how do we do that? I know it's going to happen. People being what they're going to violate it. I understand you don't have an answer, but
I don't,
this is what should be considered when you're trying to reduce this to 1.6 or 1.7. If they don't have the spaces, they will abuse it. If they have the spaces, it won't be abused. You have the ability to avoid it within your vote. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
One of the conditions from the Parking and Traffic Commission was a suggested condition, it was that a 5-year post-occupancy study to be conducted along with annual monitoring with no option to remove this condition. That annual monitoring, I believe, was what, every 6 months?
What's that?
Was it 6 months? No.
It's annual, so
Yeah.
it's once per year.
Okay, once
that
per
that
year.
Occurs over a 5-year
But it starts
period.
after 6
The
months.
6 months
That's
is
what it
6
was.
months
Starts
after
6
it's
months after,
open.
yeah.
So that way it lets traffic normalize a little bit.
Part of that monitoring could contain something to what Mr. Knight is referring to.
That is correct, and Parking and Traffic Commission did mention that, and we agreed that we would look at their parking as well as part of that monitoring.
Yeah.
So this study would commence 6 months after you reach 75% occupancy?
I think it is 75, yeah, 75 or 80% occupancy, and then it would continue on an annual basis.
Okay. And what are your projections for when you would hit 75% occupancy?
That's a question for Peter.
Oh, I know that, I know. You're good, Rebecca, but your expertise is traffic, not necessarily occupancy.
I mean, it's gonna take us 2 to 3 years to build it. It's gonna take us 2 years to lease it up. So call it 4 to 5 years from when we start, we'd be fully occupied.
Okay. So basically 2 years after you get a C of O.
Roughly, yeah. And,
Okay.
you know,
All right.
Yeah.
That's fair. Okay. Other comments from people? Oh, didn't even see you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. You snuck up there. That's quite all
Yeah.
right.
I'll just state my name. My name's Dimitri Kay, and I live at 4 Duck Pond, Unit 207, along with a lot of the neighbors here. Just wanted to voice my opinion since I've been coming to the meetings, and I said that a lot of my neighbors have been doing a lot of the communicating and advocating, but I want to voice my concerns as well. Don't have a lot of questions, and I'm not going to be able to make a strong argument on parking decimal spots, but I did also want to clarify about his question and Miss Flannery's point. It's the Lake Quannapowitt area in Wakefield. And again, it's right off of I-95 across from Jordan's Furniture.
Lake Quannapowitt.
That's it, Lake Quannapowitt. I knew I butchered it. It's the former ITT campus, and I saw them demolish it, and I pass it every day going to work. 440 multifamily residential units there. One thing that I want to just point out there is, I've had somebody else ask me, Corcoran or the developer said they'll make a contribution to the city for road improvements or realignments and whatnot, repainting the roads and arrows. I heard something to the tune of like 20,000 maybe. I kind of chuckled at that. I don't know. Again, I heard some amount, it was like a few meetings ago.
I don't think a dollar amount's ever been mentioned.
Or if it might have been for the bus, I don't know if it was a donation
Might
for the
have been
bus program.
something like that, yeah.
So I'm just want to point here, but as part of this project, Cabot, and Forbes and Equity Residential are contributing $2.3 million towards the construction of a new roadway and a roadway improvements in the area, and $1.3 million to improve the lake water quality of Lake Quannapowitt, and et cetera. So that's kind of the figures I would expect for a significant donation to be made that would actually mediate or again fix some of the issues that we're going to be facing here. I have some notes that I'll just quickly go through. Again, I'm not a great public speaker, but at this time, I think with everything going on, especially in the politics, we need to stand up for the principles of what the board does and also what Beverly kind of stands for and the kind of community that we are. Sounds like a nice spot, but it's the wrong place and it's the wrong time for it. It would be great half a mile down or 5 miles down the road towards Peabody. I looked up Linfield Commons, seems like a good place, and it's also right by the Rotary at the Route 1 turnaround. So again, ideal location, and Again, Herb's Chambers, good place, but convenience store will not do anything positive or significant for the area as well. You know, I don't think Hot Pockets or 2-liter sodas is gonna solve issues. I also saw for that place in Lake Quantipout, they're gonna be putting in a 3,600-foot restaurant there. So that's something else to think about. I think that might be better than even in a convenience store. Again, convenience store for cigarette packs, not ideal. If we allow this now, what kind of precedent do we set? We had another neighbor from Amherst Farms or whatever the Colgate Farms mentioned what kind of precedent does this set. Obviously, we have other developments in the area with Apple Village, Folly Hill, but this is another level. Again, don't want to see Beverly change like this, and I am on the Board of Trustees at Cherry Hill condominium, so I have an added interest there. Our entire board is unanimously against this development. Last thing I was going to say is, like, city's not ready and equipped to handle this development and also this increase of influx of residents and users of our facilities, schools, et cetera. Parking and car use hasn't, another point was the COVID parking we brought up. I would say parking and car use hasn't changed or decreased since COVID, really. Traffic seems to be the same for the most part. Maybe the rush hour time has shifted slightly earlier from 4 o'clock instead of 5 o'clock, but quick question, has anybody in this room gotten rid of their personal car in the last 5 years? Probably doubt it.
Could you repeat that? 'Cause the microphone-
Has anybody in the last 5 years gotten rid of their personal car here? I don't know.
Back away. Just
Back
away
me,
a little bit.
like this.
Just fine.
Okay. And yeah, if the board goes through with this, they're setting up the project and it's hypothetical residence for failure. So, again, it's just a bad situation, and yeah, that's it.
I appreciate your comments, but I think it's important that everybody realize that this is what is called a by right project, which means right now, the applicant is meeting all of the zoning requirements for the project. So it is not impossible for us to reject it, but it's very, very, very difficult to reject this plan. We're just trying to do what we can with the cooperation of Corcoran to make this as palatable as possible for all of the residents up there as well as all of the other residents in Beverly. So I think that's super important to understand. It is what they call a by right project. Thank you.
Karen Johnson, 4 Duck Pond Road, Cherry Hill Condos. Would it be appropriate to request more up-to-date parking statistics, not from 2015? Just a question, if that'd be appropriate request?
I think that's a question for Rebecca, because of the ITE data that's available, which is the Institute of Traffic Engineers.
Okay.
I don't know that it is, I don't know if it's possible.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
ITE data represents data that's up to date. We use the 6th edition, which came out only a couple of years ago. I think it was 2023 that came out. The data that was provided from the MAPC study, that's been collected from 2015 to 2023. Phase 3 covers 2021 to 2022. So that is post-pandemic period that is covering, which was also all the data that was collected in the North Shore region. All the data that we collected at Folly Hill Apartments, Cherry Hill, and Apple Village, that was all done in the last few months, so from November to now. So that is all very, very recent data right here next to the site. Similar type of sized units, similar access to transportation, so we would argue that that's, as similar as we can possibly get and the most up-to-date data that we could possibly get in comparison to this site.
Okay, thank you. The other concern that I had, Trask Lane is a private road. Does the town have any input on how that is constructed, maintained, intersections, anything like that? Because it's doesn't have striping, speed limits, there's no cops up there monitoring the safety. So is that anything that can be addressed?
So I think it's important to know that this proceeding tonight is just one layer and one aspect of the overall project, which is also subject to site plan review. And so under site plan review, the design for Trask Lane has been studied. There have been parking and traffic analysis that have been vetted by peer review, by the state, as well as these local boards and commissions. So the board is looking into all of that. It's just that is not the particular issue that is the subject of this evening's special permit request, which is limited to the parking ratio. I think, is that the right answer, Mr. Clausen?
But does parking also determine the number of units that can be built and therefore the number of cars and people that are going to be using that road? Is that all tied together?
So we have a plan before the board already that has the required amount of parking per zoning that we're required, 2 spaces per unit. We'll build that plan. We are happy to build that plan. We've designed a plan now, as my client said this morning, we've designed it at 1.6, we've designed it at 1.7, and we've designed it at 2. We'll build it at 2 spaces. This requirement, this request is saying that's more parking than is needed. And the planning board has the discretion to grant a special permit to reduce that parking. We think that will make it a better project for the reasons that we've discussed tonight.
But that doesn't address traffic. Parking is not the same as traffic.
Correct.
Right?
Traffic is part of the site plan review.
Yes.
Okay.
To answer your question, yes. The board does have, it is a private road. There will be impacts to that road. Part of conditions of a site plan approval can be to address conditions that happen to Trask Lane.
Okay.
I don't know currently who's in charge of repairing, maintaining any of that.
I don't know that either.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No, there are shared maintenance agreements between the Folly Hill Apartments and Apple Village. I don't believe Cherry Hill has any responsibility for upkeeping it, but the 2 larger projects, in fact, have a shared maintenance agreement.
Okay.
And Corcoran will step into the shoes at some point. The details are a little bit vague in their maintenance agreement, but that's our understanding.
Okay.
Okay.
George?
Wanted to add one other thing on the issue of policing up there. I was reading the Parking and Traffic Commission letter, and it specifically said that, is it Sergeant Nicholson, who's a member of the Parking and Traffic Commission, remarked on how he's up there all the time and was kind of making his comments on the parking situation. So, you know, I don't live there. I don't know how often it's patrolled, but, you know, that's on the record from, you know, the traffic sergeant of the City of Beverly Police Department.
And he was the one who voted against it? Okay. Anybody else here
Thank you.
who wishes to be heard? Anybody joining us remotely who wishes to be heard? Okay, should we go to Susan Johnson?
Am I on?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, if you could give us your name and your address, please.
Susan Johnson, 4 Duck Pond Road, Unit 219 in Beverly. That's at the Cherry Hill condominiums. In regard to the private road of Trask Lane, I know you've spoken to it, but who has the authority to change it from a private road to a public road so it's better maintained?
That would be This board would be the first step to send a recommendation to the city council that it be accepted as a public way. And then then the city council would vote to either accept it or not accept it. There are requirements that it meets the engineering standards, sizing standards of the City of Beverly subdivision ordinance for roadways.
Okay. The second thing I have to say is now on April 9th, we're going to be talking about traffic. And I respectfully request the planning board members come in between now and then to see what we have been saying about how this project's going to affect us. I think you need the facts and see them. Yeah, I think you need to really see them, not just hear stuff.
Okay, well, thank you for that. It may not be a bad thing, I think, instead of organizing a formal site plan, site visit, that it's something we probably could do all individually. Unless there's an overwhelming thought that we should do an organized site visit. Yes, Sarah?
I would love to hear from the speaker what specifically she's hoping we will see. I will say I know people who live there, so I have been there several times. I've driven around. I'm just not 100% sure what's meant, and I want to make sure that I go and see what it is you want us to see. I may not know, like if cars are parking in the wrong lot, that's not something I would notice because I don't know which cars are supposed to be where. I've gone up, it seems very quiet up there. So I'm happy to go again. I've been there often to visit people I know who live there. I just don't know what I'm supposed to see. So if you could clarify a little bit more to make sure that when I go next, I'm looking for the right things, that would be helpful.
That's a great point.
Okay, so it would be the roadway that comes off of Trask Lane, which is Duck Pond Road, and how it would go into the project. We need to show you that situation, and it has to do with the snow removal. And also, well, basically that, and just to hear from us. And we can meet with you.
No, site visits are not part of the public hearing, so you're certainly welcome. If we were to do an organized site visit, you would be welcome to walk with us or go around with us, but there couldn't be any conversation or discussion.
Oh, okay. Okay. I just think that you need to hear from everybody and see the situation.
And just to clarify, Ms. Johnson, that's not the board's rule. That's a Massachusetts state law, open meeting law violation for them to do that. So they're not ducking you or anything like that. Or just wanted to let you be aware of that. It's a Massachusetts, it's a state law for open meeting law. That's sometimes called a sunshine law. That a site visit is not part of a public hearing process, so they couldn't render any kind of opinion, even something that would say something like, that sounds good, that's an opinion. They can't say.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I understand.
All we could
All right.
talk about would be the weather, and even that's questionable.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else joining us remotely who would like to be heard on this? One last shot for anybody here in the chambers. Okay, what I would do is propose we continue this to our April 9th meeting. We've done an hour and a half on this, and we've got a good-sized agenda for the rest of the night. So I would welcome a motion to continue this. Yes.
If there is additional information needed before the board can deliberate regarding the special permit, we would want to make sure that we come back with it. We have presented what we think is a very full case. We have a Parking and Traffic Commission recommendation. We have peer review recommendations. And quite honestly, we won't know what we are designing to until we have a decision on this. And the April 9th hearing is going to be extremely long, I think. That will be the meeting that will be when we are answering everybody's questions about traffic.
Right, but we haven't gone through the second special permit that you've requested, which is the sharing of the spaces. Derek isn't here, and I think frankly, I think, given his interest in this, I think it makes sense for us to continue this to April 9th. I don't want, it's been now an hour and a half, and it's not fair to the other presenters, and frankly, it's not fair to this board. I don't want us here till 11 o'clock tonight. So I do think that continuing this to our April 9th meeting makes sense.
Is there additional information that is needed?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Or I just want to be sure that we are able to address this, and I would request that this be first on the agenda at the next meeting, because before we talk about traffic, we would like to understand what the project is going to look like.
And I think that's a fair request. I think we've been pretty fair in letting you guys go, go early and go long.
You have.
So, yes, George?
I guess just a quick question on this front, and it's probably for Ms. Brown. Trip generation, what you're modeling for traffic is based off of number of units, not necessarily number of parking spots. Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct. So everything that's provided in the IT trip generation manual, those rates are based on a per unit and don't relate at all to parking.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Flannery?
I'll move, Madam Chair, that we continue this public hearing to our meeting of April 9th and have it be first on the agenda if possible.
Is there a second? Is there discussion on the motion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Oh, all right.
No, this isn't an hour and a very.
It's an hour. Thank you.
My pleasure, thank you. No, I think that's.
What?
It's a microphone.
No. It's too early to take five.
How are you?
Okay.
Exactly. That's the goal.
All right, our second, next agenda item is the public hearing on yield plan and the public comment period on the various concepts, open space residential design, OSRD, initial review application number 13-25. For the initial review application, yield plan, and initial review for 38 Stanley Street, the applicant is the Waring School Incorporated. Public notice, Mr. Clausen?
Notice is hereby given in accordance with zoning ordinance Article 9 that the Beverly Planning Board will conduct an initial review of an open space residential design application number 13-25 during a meeting that begins at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, March 12, 2025 at Beverly City Hall, third floor, council chambers, 191 Cabot Street, Beverly, Massachusetts, 01915, to create a 4-lot residential development on 4.36 acres. Meeting to include the required public hearing on the yield plan, section 300-54C23, and public comment period, section 300-54C1D on alternative concepts. The applicant and owner is Waring School, Inc., Timothy Backlund, head of school, 35 Stanley Street, Beverly, Massachusetts, 01915. The land is located at 38 Stanley Street in an R22 zoning district and is shown on Assessor's Map number 58, lot number 1. The application and plans are on file in the Beverly Planning Department and are available for public review.
Thank you. Mr. Griffin, I am going to ask you, most respectfully, you like to go really fast. In my mind, at 8:30 at night doesn't move as fast as yours does. So I would respectfully ask if you watch your pace on this, so that we have enough time to absorb what you're telling us.
Well, I'll certainly do my best, and I hope you
appreciate it.
won't hesitate to put the brakes on if I'm
I
not doing a
will,
good
thank
job of
you.
that.
Thank you,
Okay.
but thank you.
All right, and I think there's a PDF presentation. Yeah, that's perfect, look at that. And let's go to the next slide, please.
Get it presented real quick.
Okay. Okay. And by the way, with me tonight is Will Potter. He's the Director of Finance and Operations at the Waring School.
Isn't this the wrong one?
That's the wrong presentation.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, we're doing Stanley, right? Yeah, that's what,
Yeah, that's-
Waring, that one.
there we go.
Thank you, George.
Many of you may remember this property because back in 2021, we filed a OSRD waiver request. And at the time, the idea was to save the existing single-family residence that's on the property and build 2 additional buildings. Since that time, it's become obvious that saving the building is really not possible.
Did we do a site visit out there?
We did a site visit, yeah, you absolutely did. And you might
Okay,
remember
I
a small
remember
shed
that.
in the property.
Oh, shit, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, so here's our 4.4 acre parcel just south of Route 128. On the opposite side of the street is the Waring campus, and you can see the blue line coming down. That's a stream that crosses under Route 128 and heads out towards Beverly Cove. Let's go to the next site, please. This is our site context plan, and again, our 4.4 acre site here. As we'll see in a minute, about half of the site is wetlands associated with this stream and a large wetland area in this portion of the site here. It's near some city-owned property, certainly the city compost facility here, very popular with the amount of yard waste that I generate, I know that. And some other city open space parcels up here. My understanding is that there's access off of the end of Emily Way to the open space parcels there. There's this green one here is another city-owned open space parcel. So there's some open space in the area. I think this one is also city-owned here. Let's see, what else is up? We'll go to the next slide, please. Just in case you've been driving by, this is a view of the house, the shed, and the garage at the property. Stone wall runs along most of the frontage. There's about 478 feet of frontage along Stanley Street here for this property. So we have a lot of frontage. This is looking in the opposite direction, going back towards Route 128 with the Waring campus on the right-hand side. There's the single-family house again. The area to the left is mostly lawn. It's used as overflow parking when Waring has a graduation or a large event, things like that. The house has been vacant, I understand now, according to Mr. Potter, for as much as 10 years. The heating system was removed many years ago. It has never been repaired, so it's been unheated and uninhabited for quite a long period of time. The garage does get used for some storage purposes, but that's really about it. Let's go to the next one, please. Here's our existing conditions plan. On the left side, running along the property line, is that stream that goes out, eventually reaching Beverly Cove. Here's this large BVW area. This site plan was brought to the Conservation Commission this fall. It was actually brought to them, I think, in 2015. It was brought to them in 2020. So the wetlands haven't really changed, but because the past approval was more than 3 years old, we had to get it renewed prior to filing this OSRD application. So in November of '24, the Conservation Commission approved this notice of resource area delineation. So the wetland lines have been confirmed. And these little squiggly lines that run through the parcel, of course, they mean different things, but this one here is 100 feet from the stream. This one here is 200 feet from the stream. And so there are certain requirements in the wetland regulations for doing work within 100 or 200 feet of a perennial stream. This stream is shown as perennial on a USGS map, and so we've treated it as such for the purposes of our conservation filing, and certainly for the purposes of this application as well. There are some setbacks also associated with the BVW. These flags here are the BVW flags. We have a 25-foot no disturb zone, so no work under the Beverly Conservation Bylaw can happen within 25 feet of a wetland. The next line out is 50 feet. No buildings or structures can be built within 50 feet of a BVW under the Beverly Bylaw. And the last one is the 100-foot line, and that's the limit of the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission from a BVW. So work between 0 and 100 feet from a BVW requires Conservation Commission approval. The other sort of feature of our land from a OSRD filing point of view is this steep area here, and there's a little bit of a steep area here as well. Anything over 20% slope has to be designated or identified as part of the filing process, and we've done that. Over on the right-hand portion of the slide here are the 3 buildings. Actually, if we can go to the next slide, I think we've zoomed in on this area. So here's our house, and there's a portion of the house that we understand is over 100 years old, or maybe even over 125 years old, but there were some additions put in the house in 1950. The garage, we think, is past 1950, but the shed appears to be, over 100 years old as well. So to the extent that we have to, go through a demolition delay bylaw filing and the like prior to removing those structures, we'll do it. But our plan as part of this project is to remove all 3 of those structures. To the extent that that shed is of value to some organization in the city of Beverly, Waring has no specific interest in it, and we can make that available as well. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the first thing we do with an OSRD initial filing is develop a yield plan. And so the yield plan has to conform to the Beverly subdivision rules and regulations with no waivers, no exceptions from the subdivision rules and regulations. And this does that. And what we're showing is, you can see, a pretty conventional looking cul-de-sac, a lollipop-shaped road. It's right across the street from the main entrance to the Waring campus. It's about 150 feet from the edge of the street to the center line of the cul-de-sac. That cul-de-sac has a 120-foot diameter outside radius. That layout shows, granite curbs. It shows sidewalks on both sides. It's got the hydrants, the sewers, the utilities, all the requirements of a subdivision regulation road, and slopes, everything. So there's no waivers there. And we're obviously able to fit 4 lots meeting R22 criteria. So R22 is the zoning district. So 22,000 square feet of land, 150 feet of frontage required for each of those lots, and they all have it. Now, that house footprint that you see there is pretty generic, but that's a pretty, run-of-the-mill, 2,700 square foot single-family house that, gets built in Beverly all the time. So it has about a 24-foot by 24-foot 2-car garage. It's got a 28-foot by 38-foot main box, 2 floors of habitable space, and probably a bonus room over the garage gets you up to that 2,700 square feet gross square foot number. You'd probably have a basement in addition to that. You'd probably have a deck on the back or a patio or something like that. We've also included in this layout some stormwater management. So we've got an area identified here for infiltration. And we also have these dry wells located around the property, which would take typically roof runoff, and we put that into the ground. You can see there's no work or no structures proposed within 50 feet of the BVW, so there's that 50-foot line there. We do have some work between 50 and 100 feet from the wetlands. So in between 50 feet there and 100 feet there, that work requires Conservation Commission approval. And any work within 200 feet of the stream, so this little area here is within 200 feet of the stream that's way over there. That also requires Conservation Commission approval. But, it's, again, a pretty routine subdivision layout. It's the kind of thing that I think would readily meet Conservation Commission approval. It meets, again, all of the rules and regulations and frontage requirements, zoning requirements, everything like that. So our yield plan is 4 lots. Next slide.
Mr. Griffin, can I hold you there for a second?
Of course.
Dumb question, but can you point out to me the boundaries of each parcel, of each lot, I'm sorry?
Yeah, actually, if we can go to the next slide, I think I've zoomed in on it a little bit. Yeah,
Okay.
it might be easier to see on this one, but, so you can see the lollipop shape with the dark line around the new road,
Yes.
okay? And there's a lot line going back. There's a lot line dividing lot 1 and 2, dividing lot 3 and 4. And these little, it's hard to read, but this is lot 1, 22,000 square feet, 150 feet of frontage. This guy has frontage on Stanley Street.
Yeah.
Lot 2, 29,000 square feet, 150 feet of frontage on the arc of the cul-de-sac. Lot 3 looks like 86,000 square feet, so about 2 acres, much more than the 22,000 square feet that's required. And lot 4, 35,000 or 36,000. I feel like I'm getting an eye test with 200 feet of frontage. So
Okay. Okay. Are there questions for Mr. Griffin regarding the development of this yield plan? I want to make sure, before, if there aren't any questions right now, make sure the audience understands the yield plan is the first step in this OSRD process. And what it does is it establishes the maximum number of lots that can be created on this piece of land, okay? And what Mr. Griffin has done, he's followed all of the requirements, which is it has to be without any waivers. He can't ask for any special favors, so to speak, in developing this yield plan. It's following all of the rules, all the regulations, all of the requirements to a T, and showing how many could be attained. Doesn't mean they're going to build this. This plan serves just to establish the number of lots that they're entitled to. Fair statement, Mr. Griffin?
yes.
Okay.
The other thing I'll add is that the public hearing, only required public hearing for an OSRD is for the yield plan. The concept plans are a public comment period. They are not a required public hearing. So the public hearing that's occurring right now is just for the yield plan.
Okay, George, did you have a question?
I did. I think the other thing to add to this is that this is a required process, right, in this district?
Yes.
They don't have the option of going through any other process. There was some confusion on that, on the one in Beverly Farms. I guess question, this is more for you, Ken, honestly. Staff report notes that the yield plan cannot receive variances or waivers of any kind, including from other bodies having regulatory authority over the development. Is constructing between 50 and 100 feet, that's a Conservation Commission permit, so it's not necessarily a waiver of their rules?
It just means it's within their jurisdiction.
Yeah.
You're permitted to build there without any special permission.
Okay.
They may have increased mitigation efforts for like an increased stormwater management or something like that.
That's not a rule being waived by
Correct.
any city department?
Correct.
Or board, thank you.
Well, and I could just expand on that a little bit. There are also performance standards in the wetland regulations that says, you have to follow these rules when you do work between that, within Conservation Commission jurisdiction. And I would suggest that we meet all of those performance standards as well.
Other questions for Mr. Griffin? Ken, is the planning department comfortable with the yield plan? Do they find anything?
No, this is a well-drawn by right, no waiverless subdivision plan.
Okay, since the public is allowed to comment on this yield plan, I will open it up to anybody in the public who wishes to be heard on this yield plan. If you would come and step to the podium, please, and state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Ron Jedrzak. I live at 8 Emily Way, right next door to the project coming up. And I just have a few questions. If they could bring up the picture of the houses again, of the lots. They're going to be taking, I think it's lot number 4, that's their overflow parking. They're going to be putting a house there. So if you go down the street in front of Emily Way, they have a field that they use for overflow parking too. So what happens when they have all these parties or games or graduations, they fill everything and everybody fills on the street, and you can't get through Stanley Street. It's very tough. So, and I notice on the plan, and I can't tell if the sidewalk is in the front, is that proposed to be the sidewalk that you're going to continue down to Emily Way?
Well, again, sir, this isn't,
I thought we could just ask questions.
you can, and I'm
Yeah.
just trying to explain that this is not a plan that Mr. Griffin or the applicant Waring School is proposing.
Sure, sure.
This is the first step by which they do this plan simply to establish the number of lots they can get.
Sure.
Later on, Mr. Griffin will present to us what are called concept plans. And those are basically 3 or 4 proposals as to what the subdivision could look like.
Okay. So I shouldn't be asking these questions now?
No, you can actually.
Oh, okay, so,
Yeah, you can make the comment, like, I think what you're concerned with is, will the eventual subdivision have
enough parking,
sidewalks?
sidewalks,
Yeah.
crosswalks from, because everybody just walks down the street. They don't use the sidewalk, there's no sidewalks in front of the school. And they're gonna be taking their lot that they put people in and put a house there. So it's just gonna be more difficult in that area. Everybody's gonna be parking more on Stanley Street. So it's, if you cut through Stanley Street, it's kind of a speedway, because it's a shortcut through there. And it's a dangerous area if they're gonna put more and more cars there. So we, as neighbors, we'd like to see something done there, to work with us on that. And then I had another question about, on the right side, there's a big mound, and it's all granite. We all had to blast in there to put our houses in there. So we're wondering if that hill is gonna be blasted, because on the other side of that hill is our houses. So we had a little concern about that stuff there.
So first, in regards to the sidewalks, as a yield plan, we're required to show sidewalks on the new subdivision. And so that layout, a little hard to see, but they're there. And, but they don't really connect anything. And because there are no sidewalks along Stanley Street, as you know.
Well, the sidewalk does come down to Emily Way, and it crosses over Emily Way and it stops. So it needs to be carried down to in front of your property, of those houses, and connected to your cul-de-sac.
So I think that's a different issue than the establishment of the yield plan. And I don't have any response tonight about how Waring handles parking at their functions, or how they might handle parking at their functions in the future. But Mr. Potter and I will discuss that after this meeting.
Okay.
But again, for the purpose of the yield plan, we had to show sidewalks. Right now, we're not showing sidewalks extending, up Stanley Street towards Emily Way or in the opposite direction or anything like that. And it just wasn't required at this point in the project.
Okay.
Second question regarding ledge. We are showing a little bit of cutting in this portion of the site to create this theoretical cul-de-sac. And so it's quite possible that ledge would have to be removed in that area. It's not a crazy amount of ledge construction, but it is part of this yield plan. And as we get into our alternatives A, B, and C, we'll see different amounts of work close to the hill. As a general rule, we've tried to minimize any alterations of that hill because it's expensive to do that. And if we can build out our site without that, we'd like to do that.
So when you take that number 4 house out of that lot, did you have any plan for any overflow parking when they removed that lot?
So I don't have any comments for you this evening regarding how Waring handles their parking or might handle their parking in the future. But Mr. Potter and I will discuss that after this meeting.
Okay, and are they houses for sale or are they dorms?
No, these would be sold.
Okay, that's just a question.
And I would just add one thing. You've brought up, I think, some excellent points regarding the sidewalks and the crosswalks and things like that, as well as the question of parking. I think as the process continues further, those questions become more relevant as we continue down the road. I don't want you to think we've forgotten about them or ignoring them, but again, this is just to generate, this tells us a number, he can get 4 lots, that's
Sure,
all.
sure.
And as we get more into what his concept plans are, and even further beyond that, we can certainly, and we will, take into consideration your concerns about sidewalks and crosswalks and things like that.
Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to be heard on the yield plan? Anybody participating remotely who wishes to be heard on the yield plan?
I don't think there's anybody left.
I know, I'm just,
There's nobody else there.
all right, well then. Is there any reason not to vote on this? Do we close it, do we close this? All right. Okay, yeah, because the concept plans aren't part of the public hearing. Okay, yes.
I move to close the public hearing for 38 Stanley Street. Sorry. Madam Chair, I move to close the public hearing for 38 Stanley Street, OSRD.
Seconded by Mr. Miller. Discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Do you want to take, do we want to continue with concept plans, or do we want to?
You can vote on it, you can talk
Oh,
about
we need to
concept
vote on
plans.
it, I'm sorry. I just totally overlooked it.
Do we accept it, we're voting to accept the yield plan?
Yep.
As presented? Madam Chair, I move to accept the yield plan for 38 Stanley Street, OSRD, as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Gomes. Discussion on the plan? On the motion, I mean? All right, all in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
That was entirely up to you if you want to start talking about concepts.
What's next? Let me just, let's just,
What I will say is that the Open Space Committee and the Concom have not completed their review and have not provided their letters of recommendation. They will be done before the April 9th meeting. Open Space Committee did start theirs. They wanted to do a site visit. And before providing their letter, their next meeting is the first week of April, so it'll be completed before the April 9th meeting.
why don't we do this, Mr. Griffin? Tell me what you think. Why don't we take another 15 minutes, get through whatever we can with respect to your concept plans, and then we'll continue the matter to, hopefully till April 9th. Does that sound all right?
It's wonderful, and if you guys want to have a site walk before April 9th, we have longer days during the week. We can do that in the evening or on a weekend, whatever you wish. And I have three alternatives, and I'll probably go too fast anyways, but I'll try to be brief. Okay.
I thought you did very well for the first part,
Well, thank you.
and I appreciate it, seriously.
So, again, so keeping 4 lots in mind, this happens to be our preferred plan, and what we like about it is that it sort of spaces so the house is out sort of evenly along Stanley Street. It has good presence along Stanley Street. You can see we've got, each lot has its own driveway. Each lot can see Stanley Street, so you can see people coming down, entering your property. But basically, we have, and again, these are all approximately 2,700 square foot houses. We have 2 houses in approximately the same location of the existing house and garage. So here's the house, the shed's there, and the garage is right there. Pretty much, again, right across from the main entrance of Waring. We have a house with, I think it's, I forget how long that, I think it's, let's say it's roughly 200-foot driveway from here back to the house here. And the lot 4, again, fairly short driveway, but enough room to turn around and come out nose first onto Stanley Street. And I think one of the things that's important about this plan is that, again, we have no work within 50 feet of the BVW. We have one house in this case within 200 feet of the stream, and the house is also sort of, partially within the 50 to 100 foot zone. We also have a little bit of lot 3 house within the 100-foot buffer zone. So Conservation Commission approval would be required for construction of Lot 4 and Lot 3. And we've numbered all of these, Lot 1 on the right, then Lot 2, Lot 3, and 4. And so all of these options, we've used that same numbering system. We have a little bit of work behind the Lot 1 house in the hill that was mentioned, so you can see there's a little bit of grading happening there, but not a lot. And, so this, Lot 1 doesn't end up with a lot of yard space, but Lot 2, 3, and 4 end up with, I think, generous yard space. And we've provided some calculations in here about the open space and the no disturb ratios. You may recall that the OSRD regulation requires 50% of your parcel to be set aside for no disturb zone. So we're at the 54% number for all three of these options are either 54 or 56%, maybe 53%. They're all very comparable in regards to the no disturb zone that's set aside. In regards to the open space, we've also created this lot line going across the back of the property here. And this area here becomes an open space parcel. This is required to be 50% of the buildable land, and so we happen to be at 54% of the buildable fraction of the parcel. And that's the same parcel for all three options. So we've met the open space requirement, we've met the no disturb requirement.
Can I get a question in there?
Yep.
Sure, Wayne.
I don't know what number it is, the lot to the west. The lot line goes all the way up there?
Let's see.
That's right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ken's got it right, yeah.
Why?
It's more like you have a minimum amount, or you need enough for the building, but we just made it bigger. I don't know. I guess, if for some reason you wanted more open space of this wetlands versus what we've shown, I think that's something we can discuss.
Thank you.
We do have a couple of waivers associated with this plan. Actually, the same thing shows up in the other plans as well, because they're all somewhat similar. You may recall the OSRD ordinance requires a 25-foot tract buffer on the outside of the parcels. And so in this case, Lot 3 is sort of close to the property line here. And so we don't have a tract buffer in the area behind the house on Lot 3. Similarly, on Lot 1, we have this little area here where we're putting the house probably within 25 feet in that area. So we can't have a no disturb zone right next to the house with given the amount of land that we have to work with. I don't think it's particularly significant because this parcel behind doesn't have residences on it. It's a large, conservation parcel, essentially open space parcel that the city owns. But that is a waiver that we've identified. We have a waiver associated with doing work within 100 feet of the wetlands. That's this primary conservation buffer. So there's that 100-foot line. We have a little bit of work in that portion of the site as well. And then on all three options, we'll also have this requested waiver to not map trees greater than 10-inch DBH on the parcel. We're disturbing a relatively small amount of the parcel. And in the site plan stage, we're happy to identify any trees greater than DBH that we're disturbing, but I think it would be a little impractical to go out into the woods and locate every 10-inch tree. It just would be a lot of trees and wouldn't really yield much information. And lastly, you may recall the OSRD ordinance requires you to ask for a waiver if you're going to use frontage on an existing way. And in this case, all four lots have frontage on Stanley Street, which is not a new way associated with the project, it's an existing way. And so, and this has come up in other OSRD applications as well, but that's our fourth waiver that's requested for option A, and it also shows up in option B as well. With that, let's go to option B.
Actually, can we stay on this one
Yep,
just for a
okay.
second?
Yep.
What kind of blasting or ledge removal has to be done to Lot 1 to fit that house in there?
Yeah, to me, typically the top 4 or 5 feet of ledge removal is something that can be taken out with a hammer relatively efficiently. These hydraulic hammers that go bang, 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 bang. And so this is probably, a couple days worth of ledge work I'm looking at right there. It's possible that if the hammer got in there and wasn't, reasonably productive, then we would drill and blast, and there would be the process of notifying everyone within 300 feet, and seismographs and getting the fire department out there to observe all the work and all that would have to happen. But this to me doesn't look like a lot of ledge removal, and I don't think we're going to get into that drilling and blasting kind of program.
The lots 1 and 2, they're on top of each other. I mean, those houses, and then you can move over to lot 4, and they have about 84,000 square feet. I'm just wondering if there was a more equitable division that could have been made, especially for lot 1, to give them some kind of a better yard.
Yeah, what we're trying to do is we're trying to move the development work away from the wetlands, away from the sensitive areas. We're trying to keep the work away from the steep areas as much as possible. So we're kind of working within the land that's available. The fact that, Lot 4 has a relatively large area relative to number 1, I don't think it really makes 1 any less necessarily attractive. 1 is going to be a small lot and probably, purchased by somebody who isn't particularly interested in having, a big yard. It's just, it's going to appeal to who it appeals to. And Lot 4, while it has a lot of acreage, 80,000 square feet or whatever, most of it's wet, so it's not all that useful to them anyways.
Okay.
All right. Let's go to option B. Okay. So similar to option A, 3 houses along Stanley Street. In this case, we've taken that house out back and moved the driveway in between lots 1 and lot 3. Just a little bit different. Lot 1 is actually pretty similar to what it was in A, and Lot 4 is pretty similar to what it was in option A as well. It does sort of move our driveways around a little bit in a little slightly different manner than what we saw in option A.
Mr. Griffin, does Lot B change any of the wetland or buffer disturbances from Lot A? Or Concept B versus Concept A? It looks like the house on Lot 2 would be outside of the jurisdiction.
In option A, there was a little bit of this house that still nicked into the 100-foot buffer zone, and it looks like less of it happens in this plan than happened on Lot A. But I think if you just flip back, you can probably see Lot 4, the one down here, is probably about the same in both alternatives. Yeah. Yeah, so it's really just lots, the middle 2 lots are the ones that move around here. Again, very close in the open space in the no disturb zone, total acreage as compared to the Plan A. This is 53%. I think the first no disturb one was 54% of the total parcel area. One other thing that I want to just bring up, and this shows up in all of our options as well, the city has an open space parcel here, and it has an open space parcel here. And the Conservation Commission has asked about access into these areas. Now, both of these open space parcels have, I think, pretty good access off of Emily Way. But there are probably people that walk down Stanley Street and then walk through the woods to get out back. And we obviously don't want people walking down, driveways and privately owned houses. So we are willing to relocate that walking path along the edge of the wetlands here. That's something that we can discuss as we go forward as well. And perhaps during a site walk, you might be interested in that. With that, let's go to,
regarding that trail, the Open Space Committee, as part of their discussion and part of the reason why they wanted to go out there is, I don't know that they're all concerned with having that trail because it's basically a trail to nowhere. And I guess a lot of the land that trail network does access back there is wet, inaccessible, and just not a very valuable network. So we'll see what they have to say after their letter.
yeah, and certainly if you're going to go to that open space land, you're probably, safer parking on Emily Way than you are parking on Stanley Street. I'm not sure that it sees a whole lot of traffic anyways, but just something to discuss as we go forward. And let's flip to C. C is a little bit different in that it has a subdivision road. So this little narrow strip in here would be a 40-foot wide private way with a 20-foot of pavement going out to the back. And so we have Lot 1 sort of in the same position as happened before. Lot 1's a little bit bigger than it was in options A and B. It actually is a R22 conforming lot as presently drawn. It has more than 22,000 square feet of land, and it has 150 feet of frontage on Stanley Street. So it's a conventional A&R lot, you would say. But then we have the 3 lots with frontage on the new way. Actually, lot 4 here has enough frontage on Stanley Street to qualify as well. But I think in both of these cases, we have, we have 150 feet of frontage here. We have 138 feet of frontage on lot 2. So this requires the waiver of frontage from, that's inherent in the OSRD regulations. The last lot in the back has 40 feet of frontage on the new private way. So a little bit different in that, it creates a private way, it creates the need for a road maintenance association, homeowners association, or something like that. And it has a little bit more impervious area than options A and B. But it's if the planning board likes this one better, then we're interested in it. And we have plenty of room to do stormwater management, as was shown on the yield plan. We can do infiltration into the ground. All of these options have, dry wells identified next to the buildings to receive roof runoff. And in this case, we would have an infiltration bed underneath the roadway or next to the roadway to handle runoff from the roadway as well. So that's, I think, a quick summary of A, B, and C, and I'd be happy to address any questions.
Are there questions on any of these concept plans? Go ahead, Wayne.
Here we go. Just wanted to ask about the sight lines from that access road driveway.
Yeah. So I can't give you a distance number off the top of my head, and I can, prior to our next meeting, but it does, if you're standing here looking up and down Stanley Street, it's pretty flat, it's pretty open. I think there's pretty good sight distance in both directions.
This is the Waring School, right?
That's the main entrance, correct, yep.
Yeah.
There is a bit of a hump of soil here, and so this, driveway doesn't have great sight distance, but I think, at this point, you're another 150 feet back or whatever, and you do have adequate sight distance, I think. But I can get some specific numbers.
Other questions on any of the concept plans?
Mr. Griffin, do any of the concept plans show any sidewalk construction along Stanley Street?
No. But obviously, that's something we're gonna have to discuss.
Okay, I suspect we all want to spend some time, more time with these plans, so, are we gonna be able to do this on April 9th?
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a question, Mr. Clausen?
Yep.
In your staff report, what you were referring to earlier about the Open Space Committee, you referred to, it appears that on the 3 concepts that the lots can be reconfigured to be smaller to include more of the wetland areas in the open space parcel?
Yeah.
Is that what you were referring to?
It's partly that, because especially because if you're looking at, especially on concept A and B, this lot 4 does encompass a lot of that wetland space. That's really the only usable space on this lot is in this triangle here, basically. And if that trail, which runs, basically currently runs to right here, like where the hand is, right about to here at the tree line, they've proposed to move it basically on the edge of the wetland right here. That trail is in the private lots. So if that trail were to exist, I don't know that it should be on the private lots, and if these lots could be reconfigured to be a little bit, just cut off the corners and some of the unusable spots and keep the trail all on the open space parcel rather than on private lots. But again, don't know if that trail is going to be,
That's why when I
if the
read
open
this-
spaces committee is going to be how much they're gonna advocate for that trail yet.
Okay, thank you, that's why I wanted to mention it in terms of reading it. Thank you, Ken.
Okay, so I would welcome a motion to continue this to our,
Either April 9th or April 30th.
April 9th, we can do, it's,
Well, you're looking at what we have for agenda items.
it's gonna be Trask Lane, it's gonna be Trask Lane.
Lane. Yeah, it's gonna be parking, it's gonna be the night.
And as of right now, that's all. I don't have any new applications, we don't have any public hearings to set.
okay, why don't we do it to April 9th?
Okay.
The other thing that is, I think it is a requirement for OSRD is
We
a
have to
site
have a
visit.
Before the preferred plan, that's what I was pointing
Yeah.
out to Madam Chair. We have to have one before we, do we make that?
All right, well, why don't we, do we need to set a date for this?
Yeah. So if that changes,
The time.
because we're on, April's the first of our 3-week cycles for
Yeah.
the year. So the meetings are 3 weeks apart rather than 4 weeks apart.
Joy.
If the timing works better for doing a site plan like after April 9th, it's or a site visit, I mean, not a site plan. It's up to your discretion.
Okay, are people able to access calendars now?
I've got a vacation planned at the end of the month, but this Saturday at 8 o'clock in the morning is open.
This Saturday. This, at what time?
8 o'clock?
Ah, by the,
No? 8:30?
thank you, Mr. Griffin.
Okay.
You put spring vacation in there, we've had Easter weekend, that's April. Mid-April. April 5th. What do you think, Madam Chair?
Well, let's start with, do people want to do it in the evening? Or as a lunch hour thing during the week? And I don't know what.
I
Okay.
can do whenever. I'm good.
Marcus, you have? You can- Okay.
Everyone should just turn their mics on right now for the kind of do a round robin.
Yeah. You could do evenings?
Yeah, afternoons, evenings. During the week.
Let me ask this, what about, are Saturdays doable for people? When are you away, Mr. Griffin?
The weekend of the 22nd and the 29th, I'll be out.
Okay, and that's of March, right?
Right.
Okay. Okay.
You will too, right? Yeah.
What about Saturday, April 12th?
Saturday, April 12th?
Works for me.
I could, yeah.
That's the
Yep.
first day of Passover, if that means anything to anyone.
Oh, it is.
Okay.
I don't know who celebrates.
I think that's more of a starts at dusk kind of deal, isn't it?
That
Unless
would
it
be-
starts the day before.
Well, I don't want to offend anybody,
That
so,
would be the 12th, that would be in the afternoon. If that's the first day, evening of Passover, it would be the 12th in the evening. The 12th daytime, because we're in the morning hour, right?
Passover starts in the evening of the 12th.
Of the 12th, yeah.
all right, so, can,
Yeah.
can people do,
The 12th?
do you all want to do the 12th?
I can do,
Yeah, I can do the 12th.
yeah,
Okay, how early is early?
Can you do it?
Anytime.
anytime.
All right, 9 AM?
9 AM?
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to
Or move to,
move to,
what day is it?
it is
Yes, ma'am.
Saturday, April 12th,
Move to,
2025 at 9 AM.
yeah,
A site visit
what time?
for
9 a.m.?
9 AM for 38 Stanley Street.
Okay. I move to set a site visit for Saturday, April 12th at 9 a.m. for the 38 Stanley Street OSRD review application.
Okay, is there a second? Anybody? You guys are fading. George? All right, we'll give it to Marcus this time.
It's going to be 9 o'clock.
Any discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes.
Just,
Thank you all very much.
Now, wait, we have to continue.
just to,
but-
and just to
continue.
make everyone aware, a site visit does not require a quorum. It's not a public hearing.
Yep,
But it is something that has to be noticed. That's all.
okay.
Yep.
Madam Chair, would you like a motion to continue this public hearing until April 30th?
Huh? No, it's not a public hearing.
It's not a public hearing,
It's-
continuing
The
public comment period.
public
now.
comment period and discussion or whatever.
Yep. If the visit's the 12th, then they would have to go to the.
Yeah, I guess we have to go to the 30th, because
Yeah, that's- I
If
think it
the
is
site visit's the 12th, you,
Yeah, it is the 30th.
Yep.
okay, so then,
That's what I mean, you could. Well, this is the public hearing on the,
it's not a public hearing, public comment period.
the public,
We've already
the public
voted
hearing
on it.
was closed when we voted on the yield plan.
okay.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep, I'm good.
can you make a motion,
Motion
or
to-
somebody?
To continue the public comment period
Yes.
for the OSRD application for 38 Stanley Street to our meeting of April 30th?
All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Yes. Do we need a vote?
Yeah.
Can you move to
Move
recess?
for a
of,
5-minute recess to reconvene at 9:25?
Seconded by Nate. All in favor? Okay, we'll be back in 5. Thank you, everybody. Do we have to move to resume? Do I have a motion to resume our hearing, please? So moved. Second. All in favor? Motion passes. We're back.
We're back.
We're back.
We're here.
All right, where's my agenda? Here it is. All right. What's that? This is a okay, our next agenda item is number 6. It is a modification request, special permit number 194-24 for the property at 14 Greenwood Avenue. LLC, ownership is 14 Greenwood Beverly LLC, and they are seeking to modify the approved special permit by reducing the plan from 2 pork chop-shaped lots to 1 pork chop-shaped lot. Sounds like a settlement agreement to me.
Yes, Madam Chair, that's correct. As you know, this board,
Got sued.
well, we say it got appealed, right?
Yeah.
But it was, the decision was appealed. The decision had been entered by this board on October 29th. So we had extensive discussions with the neighbors, Ben Carlson himself, and through myself with the neighbor's attorney, Mike Duffy, who's here tonight. The neighbors are also here. So we came to an agreement as to settle this, and the agreement is all the major points have been agreed upon. We have a settlement agreement in writing, but it has not been finalized, but we expect it to be. It's in, Mr. Duffy may want to speak to it, but my understanding is that there's just some details added to our basic agreement. And you're seeing on the plan, the basic agreement, again, reduces it from 2 pork chop lots down to 1 pork chop lot. There's some widening of the way, and I'm going to have Bob Griffin, after I'm done, take you through this in greater detail. And also, we have agreed to a condition that there be no further subdivision of the lot. In addition, I think it would be prudent, should the board vote to modify tonight, that we have a condition that just says it's subject to the final written settlement agreement of the parties in the case. So having said that, I'll ask Bob Griffin to take you through the details.
Thank you, Tom, and fortunately not very complicated. Okay. So we can, yeah. Let's go to the next one, please. There's our locust plan, and so I've got the sort of the before and after kind of comparison type of plans that will follow this with the plans that were approved in October for the 2 pork chop lot plan, and then the current plan showing the 1 pork chop lot plan. So let's go to the plan of land next. This is the September plan. You can see, pork chop lot here, conforming lot here with 2 lots. And so let's go to the next one, please. Oh, yeah. This is the current plan, 1 pork chop lot, 1 conforming lot. This lot picked up about 10,000 square feet of area as compared to the September layout. And this plan obviously got much larger. It's 160,000 something square feet. This is the R90 zoning district, so we're well over the required 90,000 square feet of lot area. We have an easement here that's going to handle a sewer utility, and there's an easement that runs back and forth left to right here that picks up some water and some gas, potential utilities as well, to serve the house on lot 2. We also have an easement up here where the driveway will come in to serve lot 2. And let's go to the next plan, please. Again, this was the road improvement plans. You may recall the fire department had expressed some concerns about the inability to get up to the top of the hill here and to access the nearby residences. So we had proposed this road improvement plan and had gained some consent of or approval by the fire department. And the new road improvement plan is very similar. We've added a couple things to it. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So we've added a little turnout here that wasn't in there before, subsequent, or as a result of our discussions with the neighbors. There's also a note in here about there's apparently a drain pipe somewhere in this general vicinity that we think is clogged or might be clogged, and so we're going to unclog it or repair it or somehow divert that water away, and that should improve the longevity of the road. This road is going to be capable of handling fire trucks. It's essentially the same plan as you saw in September with a couple little minor additions. We've also flared out the entrance at Greenwood Avenue here a little bit as well. So that's, again, pretty much the same thing as you saw before with some improvements. Next plan, please. This is the layout. This was our concept of how to, where to put the two houses and where to put the driveway to come in a manner that would, have the greatest chance of getting Conservation Commission approval. And we had a site walk. We looked at these locations out on the site, you may recall. We had some utilities coming up from Greenwood Avenue here and splitting off and going to the various houses here. And our current concept plan is the next sheet. And so not a ton different. We've got bringing in water and gas, electric telephone cable underground in the backyard of number 14, getting it over to the house here. There's a sewer line that would come out through this sewer easement to hit an existing sewer line up here on the neighbor's property. Again, our driveway coming in, avoiding this little pocket of wetlands and avoiding an intermittent stream crossing as well. So we think this is, all work that can be readily approved by the Conservation Commission. And that, I think, pretty well sums it up. I'd be happy to address any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Griffin? Mr. Griffin, did you have an opportunity to see the March 6th, 2025 memorandum, I guess, from Lisa Chandler?
I don't think that made it to me.
Did I get that? Did I not get that to you?
I don't remember seeing that. I hope I didn't miss it, but anyways.
Is it just that one page?
It's just that one page, and yeah, it's just that one page, and a lot of it would have to do with more of construction subdivision questions rather than special permit questions. That may have been why I didn't give it to Mr. Griffin.
Okay, so the width of the roadway is not 20 feet. It's, I think, 15 or 16 feet throughout its entire length, and but I think it was adequate for the fire department, and so that's the answer to her first question. Her first question is the width 20 feet? Can it support emergency vehicles? Yes, it can support emergency vehicles, and I don't think that there are common driveway standards in Beverly that I'm aware of. This office has concerns to common driveway access, including the condition of the roadway and existing drainage. No roadway surface improvements are proposed besides crushed stone shoulders in some locations. We are proposing to top the gravel surface as necessary and to improve drainage. And so I think this is, again, this is the same plan that has already been approved by the planning board, and she did not have these concerns previously. Provide neighbor agreements for both sewer extension and water easements. So I don't, I think that's fair. What is the current water line diameter? Plastic water lines are not permissible in the city of Beverly. So we have put plastic water lines in private cross-country routes in Beverly before, but in any event, the current water line goes from approximately here to the mansion, and I believe it's an 1.5-inch galvanized steel line. Galvanized steel is not used anymore because it tuberculates and clogs over time, and it has a lot of zinc in it, and it's just not healthy. So I think that, we will either put in a plastic line or a copper line, and we had anticipated a similar diameter to that 1.5-inch line that was previously installed in that area. So that would be my response to the March 6th memo from the engineering department.
Okay. Other questions from Mr. Griffin or Mr. Alexander? Wayne?
Just wondered if any of the neighbors have weighed in on the new plan? Are they tied up with planning of the new plan?
It's a settlement.
Yeah, we've provided them, this plan is the result of discussions with the neighbors through their attorney. So yeah, they've had input into it. It's actually largely what, what the changes are largely what they were asking for. And just want to back up for a minute. Part of our settlement agreement, one of the reasons I want the modification to be subject to the signing of the final settlement agreement is, part of that agreement, and the reason why this can make some sense for us is that we are being granted the rights to connect up to the existing sewer lines, so we don't have to build, rip up Greenwood Ave to put in a new sewer line. To accommodate that, we're being given access to a neighbor's existing sewer line. And also, there is a existing access to a water line that the mansion goes through. We're going to rip that old galvanized pipe up and put in modern piping. And also, the new house will be connected into that. So that's all part of the settlement agreement, and that's why. And just because, the other reason why it has to be subject to is if the highly unlikely event that we don't sign off on this settlement agreement, then we would go back to the old one. So this one would be null and void. Okay?
Yes,
All right, thank you.
sure. Other questions? I'm just making a note. Hold on a second.
We have a letter from the fire department telling us how much they looked through the plan.
We don't, but it's basically the same road improvement plan as it was before that the fire department signed off on.
Exactly,
With
but it's a
more
little.
improvements.
More improvements. So it's an improved version of what the fire department signed off on when we got our approval in last October. Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, I think as you all know, this is a request for modification, so we either have to deem it to be a minor modification, which allows us to deal with the matter this evening, or if we deem it a non-minor or a major modification, then we have to schedule a public hearing. So, that being said, if anybody would like to offer a motion on this, I would welcome it. And that's just on whether or not it's a minor or non-minor modification.
If I could be heard for just a minute.
Of course.
As to why I think it is a minor modification, it's a reduction.
Right.
It's less than what you already approved, so that would be our point.
I think we're right there with you.
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Flannery.
Madam Chair, I move to deem the,
Oh, microphone.
sorry, Kim. Where's the letter on? I move to deem the modification at 14 Greenwood Avenue as minor.
Is there a second? George, is there a second? Discussion on the motion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Okay, so we have to go through those yes.
He was a no on that.
You were no? Okay. Okay, so motion still passes, just not unanimously. Do we still have to go through all these findings for the modification of the special permit? I think we do, don't we?
I would, especially given what,
Yeah, that we got sued.
yeah. I think someone,
Oh, Mr. Duffy, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Not to belabor something that's been taking a long time for everyone tonight, but I just wanted to stand up to echo that my clients do support the reduction in this plan. I do also agree, and I was going to propose the condition that Mr. Alexander proposed, that it be subject to the signed settlement agreement. I think we're almost there, but we're not finally at an inked agreement yet, and I do think we'll get there. And then one other comment that I would make is to retain the conditions that are in the existing permit, and also the condition that was expressed in the application Exhibit A at number 7.
What was that?
was that the condition for no further subdivision?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, so let's talk about these 10 conditions for a pork chop special permit, so that the record has some substantial evidence behind it. So the first condition is the site is an appropriate location for the proposed use and the character of adjoining uses will not be adversely affected. Just,
Madam Chair, in this case, the proposed pork chop lot is on an existing structure, and there's really no change to the, character of Greenwood Avenue created by the creation of a pork chop lot.
thank you. Number 2 is that no factual evidence is found that property values in the district will be adversely affected by such use.
I would argue that's never been the case, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, well, I'll say, I don't think there's been any evidence presented at all regarding property values adversely or positively affected by this, so.
I concur, Madam Chair.
Okay, the third is no undue traffic and no nuisance or unreasonable hazard will result.
Certainly, if we get a signed agreement on this, then those most affected will have agreed to that point.
And there's been no evidence presented as to undue traffic, undue or nuisance or unreasonable hazard. Would you all concur with that?
Certainly not on this version of the proposal.
What's been presented?
Okay. Number 4, adequate and appropriate facilities will be provided for the proper operation and maintenance of the proposed uses.
I think certainly the utility plan is a lot more, fully thought out now than what we were dealing with at the last time this special permit came before the board.
Okay. There are no valid objections from abutting property owners based on demonstrable fact.
We have heard none.
And I agree with the agreement that has been presented on.
Okay. 6, the minimum lot area of the pork chop shaped lot shall be at least the minimum lot area required in the zoning district in which the pork chop shaped lot is located, except the portion of the lot which is the narrow strip or portion of the lot to the way shall not be included in the lot area calculation.
Ken, I see you're zooming in on that, but I think we can,
Thank you, Ken.
I know it's hashed out on one of these. There it is.
The narrow strip here.
We're R90, right? Yep.
Okay, so we're saying that the,
I'm sorry,
what?
I zoomed out, I thought you were looking at, sorry, you're good.
Okay, so the plan basically confirms this statement in paragraph number 6, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Number 7, the width of the pork chop shaped lot measured at the shortest distance between side lot lines is no less than 75 feet at any point between the street and the existing or proposed building on the lot. Pork chop lots approved by the planning board previous to December 1984 with less than the required frontage, but at least 20 feet of frontage, shall be considered valid building lots for a period of 15 years from the date of adoption of this zoning amendment, which was September 5, 1991. On September 5, 2006, any pork chop lot approved by the planning board prior to December 1984, which is vacant or for which a valid building permit has not yet been issued, shall lose its status as a grandfathered lot and be considered unbuildable.
So on the plan, we have a minimum width of 100 feet, it looks like, Ken?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Number 8, all rear, strike that. Number 8, all front, rear, and side yard setbacks shall be the same as the minimum setbacks specified for the zone in which the lot is located. Site plan supports the finding that that is true?
Yes.
We only have a concept building on the
Okay,
plans, but yes, that supports it, as well as where the existing, or proposed lot line would be from the existing mansion.
okay. Number 9 is the depth of that portion of the lot which fails to satisfy the lot frontage requirements set forth in the definition of frontage in section 300-5 between the street and the existing or proposed building on the lot cannot exceed a distance of 250 feet from the street.
You're showing 211.6 on the plan there, Ken?
Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Alexander, did you have something?
Just on the condition of, about the, subject to the signing of the settlement agreement.
Yep.
I just discussed it with Mr. Duffy, just so that we have a termination, so within 30 days of tonight's meeting.
Okay. So that agreement within 30 days, did you say?
Yeah, executed agreement.
Executed within 30 days of this.
And if not, then the prior special permit would be, you know, reconstituted, and this would be null and void.
Okay. Let's see. Did we talk about number 9? Yeah, you just said that, 211 feet, that's right. Okay, number 10, there shall not be more than one pork chop-shaped lot with frontage contiguous to it.
This is the only pork chop lot on the site, and
Okay.
neither lot contiguous is a pork chop lot.
Okay, now let's just deal with finding, supporting evidence for the special permit requirements. So number 1, that the specific site is an appropriate location for the proposed use, and that the character of adjoining uses will not be adversely affected.
There's a long history of residential use on the site and ample evidence of subdivision both on this site and on adjoining properties.
Thank you, George.
And real quick, Madam Chair, just to clarify, some of these are going to be redundant just because they come
Right.
from 2 separate sections of the
Right.
City of Beverly zoning ordinance.
Okay, as number 2 is that no factual evidence is found that the property values in the district will be adversely affected by such use. I think we've already
covered that a
talked
few minutes
about
ago.
on that one.
Spoken to that.
Okay. Number 3 looks like it's redundant as well, that no undue traffic and no nuisance or unreasonable hazard will result. We've already discussed that.
Number 4 we have, Madam Chair.
Number 4, that adequate and appropriate facilities will be provided for the proper operation and maintenance of the proposed use.
That we addressed.
I think we addressed that as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
As well as-
Number 5, that there are no valid objections from abutting property owners based on demonstrable fact.
We spoke to that.
We spoke to that, thank you, Ellen. Number 6, that adequate and appropriate city services are or will be available for the proposed use.
I think the biggest issue here was the fire department, right? And we've discussed this extensively tonight and previously.
Okay, with that being said, I'd welcome a motion on this, please.
Madam Chair, we have to make a motion to make those findings.
Yes, I'm sorry, you're right, you're
We're gonna
absolutely
move-
right.
We're going to move the find, yes. Hold on a second.
Madam Chair, I move to make the following findings with regard to the modification request for special permit number 194-24, 14 Greenwood Ave, applicant Benco LLC. This is specific to the pork chop special permit.
Yep,
1, that the site is an appropriate location for the proposed use and the character of adjoining uses will not be adversely affected. 2, that no factual evidence is found that property values in the district will be adversely affected by such use. 3, that no undue traffic and no nuisance or unreasonable hazard will result. 4, that adequate and appropriate facilities will be provided for the proper operation and maintenance of the proposed uses. 5, that there are no valid objections from abutting property owners based on demonstrable fact. 6, that the minimum lot area of the pork chop shaped lot shall be at least the minimum lot area required in the zoning district in which the pork chop shaped lot is located, except the portion of the lot which is the narrow strip or portion of the lot to the way shall not be included in the lot area calculation. 7, that the width of the pork chop shaped lot measured at the shortest distance between side lot lines is no less than 75 feet at any point point between the street and the existing or proposed building on the lot. Pork chop lots approved by the planning board previous to December 1984 with less than the required frontage, but at least 20 feet of frontage shall be considered valid building lots for a period of 15 years from the date of adoption of this zoning amendment, 9/5/1991. On September 5th, 2006, any pork chop lot approved by the planning board prior to December 1984, which is vacant or for which a valid building permit has not yet been issued, shall lose its status as a grandfathered lot and be considered unbuildable. 8, that all front, rear, and side yard setbacks shall be the same as the minimum setbacks specified for the zone in which the lot is located. 9, that the depth of the portion of the lot which fails to satisfy the lot frontage requirements set forth in the definition of frontage in section 300-5 between the street and the existing or proposed building on the lot cannot exceed a distance of 250 feet from the street. And 10, that there shall be no more than one other pork chop shaped lot with frontage contiguous to it.
Wow.
Second, Madam Chair. I'll second
All right,
that.
I have a motion by Mr. Gomes, seconded by Ms. Flannery. All in favor? All opposed?
Madam Chair, make the following findings with regard to the modification request for special permit number 194-24, 14 Greenwood Ave, applicant Benco LLC. 1, that the specific site is an appropriate location for the proposed use and that the character of adjoining uses will not be adversely affected. 2, that no factual evidence is found that property values in the district will be adversely affected by such use. 3, that no undue traffic and no nuisance or unreasonable hazard will result. 4, that adequate and appropriate facilities will be provided for the proper operation and maintenance of the proposed use. 5, that there are no valid objections from abutting property owners based on demonstrable fact. And 6, that adequate and appropriate city services are or will be available for the proposed use.
Thank you. I have a motion by Mr. Gomes, seconded by Ms. Flannery. Discussion? None? All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes.
Madam Chair, move to grant the modification to special permit 194-24, 14 Greenwood Avenue, Benco LLC, subject to the following conditions. 1, subject to compliance with the with the conditions contained in the comment letters, memos, or emails submitted by the various department heads, which are attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. Captain Jacob Kraling, City of Beverly Fire Department, Bureau of Fire Prevention, dated June 4th, 2024, and August 9th, 2024. Lisa Chandler, PE, City Engineer, dated June 13th, 2024, August 15th, 2024, and August 20th, 2024. Would we like to include the most recent one as well?
March 6th.
Are there any objections to including that recent letter from?
Well, there are no conditions in that letter.
No.
Just comments.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And Laura Delakai, Director of Public Health, dated August 15th, 2024. Number 2, that the applicant will secure a performance guarantee in the same manner as outlined in Chapter 375, Subdivision of Land, Section 375-13I, Performance Guarantee, and that the infrastructure improvements are completed before an occupancy permit is issued. And 3, that the modification is subject to the agreement between the applicant and abutting property owners, and that the modification shall be valid for 30 days. Shall be valid as long as that agreement is signed within 30 days. Is that
30 days of,
from this decision?
right,
Receipt of the final.
yep. And Mr. Alexander, you wanted an additional comment that if this agreement is not signed within 30 days, then basically.
The modification would be null and void. It
Void.
would revert to the original special permit.
I'm happy to modify my condition,
Your motion.
my motion as such.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by, who are you, Flannery? Oh,
I'm sorry, maybe I didn't hear it, but the owner applicant agrees to the condition of the subdivision.
We did not say that.
My
Thank you.
apologies.
Thank you.
Subject to the condition that the,
Bless you.
I apologize. Where's the language on this? I just don't want to get it wrong. Number 7, I know, right? Yeah, so this would be condition number 4, that the owner applicant agrees to a condition that there will be no further subdivision of these lots and no additional units except for lawfully created accessory dwelling units, ADUs, pursuant to the Massachusetts state laws and the Beverly zoning ordinance.
Okay, so they just read it. Okay, okay.
So that was 4 conditions total, the original 2, 1 related to the agreement and terminating within 30 days if that agreement is not signed, and then the 4th stating that there would be no further subdivision of the lot, just to clarify for the record.
Okay, we're good. Okay, and there was a second by Flannery. Discussion on the motion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Gomes, I think there's a job for you in the advertising world.
He could be that little voice in commercials that read the, you know, that read the fine print. Thank you, seriously, George, once again, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, appreciate your time.
Thank you. You'll send a copy of that signed agreement to the planning department?
Yes.
Okay,
I will, yeah, absolutely, happy to do that.
thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
I need 3 tables.
Yeah, take a copy of that, on subdivision.
Oh, yes, I said 10 o'clock.
The one that's actually been recorded.
All right, has he seen him?
Yeah, I'll look at this.
Okay.
Right, it says we're supposed to get it. Yeah, what they do is they reduce it. Yeah. For the book, and you can't read it.
We got a little bit more, Marcus, don't run out.
I'll get that. Okay.
Okay, so the next agenda item is the approval of minutes for January 15th, 2025. Have you seen Ellen's?
Mr. Clausen?
No problem.
Okay.
Curious why you elected to go.
Gentlemen, can I ask you to take your conversation outside? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, how about a motion on the minutes?
Mr. Clausen, did you note them as scriveners?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that's fine with me.
then I would move to accept the minutes, both, can I have both, Ellen?
No, do them one at a time, please.
Move to accept the minutes of the January 15th, 2025 Planning Board meeting as amended.
All right, is there a second? Seconded by George. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. How about the next set of minutes, February 12th?
Same, Mr. Clausen?
Same.
I move to accept the minutes for the February 12th, 2025 Beverly Planning Board meeting as amended.
Is there a second? Okay, seconded by George. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Do we have any new business?
No.
April 9th is gonna be, I think, a long night.
Yes.
So, well, what?
I guess the only thing would be, do we need to start a discussion of a special meeting? Would there need to start thinking about, do we need to start having a discussion about a special meeting just for? I don't think it's necessary yet, given what's on our agenda, but if I get more applications for other things,
Yeah, I think we had talked about keeping that night,
Yeah.
tried it clear, but
I don't have anything new.
good.
The only things that could possibly be heard that night would be if a modification were to come in, an A&R, items that don't require setting a public hearing.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't anticipate anything, but I can never be positive.
Okay, any other new business? Young man, new business? That's it? Okay. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Oh, I keep saying motion, it is a motion. Yeah.
You did it.
Okay, all in favor? All opposed? 10 o'clock, people.
There you go, Miss Al.
That was my goal.